Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekend Debate Reviews. We've got a fresh new devious debate. I don't know how devious it is. It's Alex
I
O'Connor
don't
and
know.
Francis Collins. They're both very big brain people. I expect
Hmm.
it'll be very respectful.
Cerebral, probably.
Yes.
Francis Collins. I mean, he's definitely one of the more palatable sort of Christians out there. He's sort of a guy who has been working in the Human Genome Project. He does a lot of science. He's definitely one of the better people out there because he sort of is like, yeah, science gives us truth. We really should follow the science. And he's got spiritual beliefs. Okay, I think they're based upon really poor reasoning, but hey, that's just me.
I kind of understand where he's coming from. Not to be that I used to be, a believer like you, and then I grew up. But like when I was younger, I had a very
Right.
similar idea that like science is for real world and religion is
Yeah.
for spirit world, which isn't
Yeah.
unreal, but like not the same as real world,
Right.
like the
Right.
physical world kind of thing.
Mm. Yeah, there's sort of non-overlapping magisteria, sort of um and you'll see some Christians take this position, but you'll also see them argue, oh, there's nothing incompatible between science and religion kind of thing. And I think on a personal basis that can be true. Like you can have religious or spiritual or whatever beliefs, and they're compatible with your beliefs on science. But I wouldn't say they're compatible in the same thing as, well, you can use both to find out, true things about the world around you. I think one's very good at finding out true things about the world around you, and one's very bad at finding out true things about the world around you. Because, I like to challenge theists with sort of what is one true thing that has been, confirmed by humanity that religion has given us in the last 2,000 years, like one fact about reality that has been confirmed and, by everybody. And it kind of is, I get a variety of answers. I get a lot of the time they just bring up Christian scientists. And it's like, no, 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 I'm not talking about Christians using science. I'm talking about what the religion of Christianity, like the methodology of prayer and, beseechment and reading the Bible, what has it actually told us about the world around us? And some of them go, oh, well, we've proved God. And it's like, really? Really? I would disagree.
Yes.
So that one's funny. But yeah, but usually the answer is not forthcoming because it really hasn't shown us anything about the world. We can point to mathematics, computing, combustion, and we can point to all of these things that science has discovered and we've confirmed, but religion doesn't, well, it doesn't give us any of these things, and it doesn't give us a way to confirm anything, which is a problem.
Well, the
Because
weird
two
thing is it
people,
does. Well, some religions, like for example,
what do you
Jesus
mean?
tells us in the New Testament that,
Yeah.
ask for something in my name and it will be granted. So there is a way to confirm, according to Christianity at least. It's just no one's ever been able to confirm it that way, weirdly enough.
Yeah, yeah. So it hasn't given us a way to confirm it?
Well, I suppose to rephrase, it has given us a way to confirm, and that's what enables us to falsify it, because it says if you do this, then this will happen, and that doesn't happen, therefore the thing is false.
Yeah, yeah, but it still doesn't fall into things that are true about the world around us, I guess. I suppose if your argument is religious gives us a way to confirm that it is true there's no God, then maybe I'm on board with that. I don't, but without the religion in the first place, there wouldn't be the God claim. So I don't. Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah, it gets weird. Most definitely. I
Yeah.
just took a shower before the show. My hair's still wet, in fact, and I was listening to Dr. Kip's book because I'm starved for time I can listen to Dr. Kip's book because I'm working all the damn time. But I digress. He was just going over a section where he's talking about how there's this idea among the evolution of religion where the gods are all related in the same way the humans are all related. And like humans, gods are all made of generally the same stuff. And like humans, they have ancestors who are no longer with us. And maybe you can trace that line of descent back to some primordial god who was the first and started everything. But like our ancestors, he's not around anymore. And so that got me thinking along those lines.
Interesting.
Yeah. So maybe we're all just praying to gods that haven't been around for a few thousand years. We need to find the gods that are around today. And considering what happened to the last god who showed up among humans, maybe they're a little shy.
Maybe.
Like just whispering sweet nothings to Muhammad in a cave because he doesn't want to come out and get crucified. I don't know. All right, so this, I forget which channel this is from. It's one I hadn't come across before. It's like probably Mighty Philosophy. I don't know. Mighty's in the name or something. This fellow, he's a guy who likes to have conversations, but he also likes to call them debates. And so I haven't watched anything but the introduction, and oh my goodness, there's a lot of introduction. Like he does an intro for who Alex O'Connor is, and he does an intro for who Francis Collins is. And, they're good introductions. You're very cinematic. And in fact, I learned that Francis Collins is the most decorated scientist currently alive, according to this introduction. And it may even be true. But then once he brings them on, he has them each introduce themselves. And I'm like, my goodness. So
yeah, a lot of introduction going on.
Actually starts asking the first question, and it's
okay.
It's an interview style, or so I take it, though he will have them talk to each other at some point. But he's because the question is, does God exist? Since Francis Collins has the affirmative, he starts with him. But he doesn't just go straight for the proposition. He's going to ask him, I think he wants to ask him to define the difference between proof and evidence, which, in fairness, is a good thing to start.
That's fair. And so, I mean, I do respect Francis Collins. I think his work on genetics has been amazing. His work on religion has been pretty terrible. But Alex O'Connor at the same time is going down this idealism path, which is weird as well. Like it's kind of this, if consciousness is the base unit of the universe, then the entire universe is conscious. And it's just like, it's kind of weird, the things that he's been putting out lately. And granted, he hasn't been like 100%, nothing's real and it's all just sort of a panpsychism thing. But it's been a bit strange on his ideas on consciousness. And I'm not 100% sure where his head's at on that one, because the whole like idealism is kind of the thing that sort of says, well, primarily things exist in a mind of some sort. The universe may be a mind of some sort. And I don't see any reason to believe that. I think that sort of some of the guests there, I remember he had a woman on who was talking about how sort of everything progresses towards consciousness kind of thing. And it was kind of a bit weird. But the problem was there were so many ifs in there, like, because they will say, well, if this is the case, then this. And the question is, well, yeah, that is true, right? But it doesn't necessarily follow, because you've got the if there, right? Like, so if consciousness is the base sort of, foundational building block of the universe, then all of these things follow. And I agree they follow. The problem is the if, right? Like, the problem is that first if on front, because you're not actually like confirming that is the case. So I'm not sure. I think that it's been a bit odd from O'Connor recently, and I'm not sure I'm on board with the whole sort of idealism thing. I think I'm still an empiricist. I think I still go for empiricism, which sort of says the only way we can confirm or we can acquire knowledge is through our senses of the world, of the universe around us. I'm not sure I'm on board with any kind of idealism.
Yeah, the consciousness thing, that's a weird argument, because like based on what we observe, it seems like everything progresses towards crab, but let's presuppose if crab rather than consciousness is the basis of all reality, then
I don't remember the argument. I don't remember the argument, but it was kind of, he was talking to a woman talking about like consciousness, and it sort of, all of these things followed. But as I said, what I noticed was a whole bunch of ifs in there, sort of thing. So yeah.
If you're gonna then why not?
Yeah,
like
why not?
everything just becomes why not.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what our friend has to say.
Make a distinction between proof and evidence. So how would you differentiate those terms?
I think that's really important. The book I wrote 18 years ago about my own faith journey, called The Language of God, the subtitle is A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief. Not so. I don't think God intended for us to have proof. If there was, we would all be running around being good little believers, following what is.
It's such a weird thing to say, because if he wants people to believe, why would he not? Like, even if he wants to make us figure it out, prove you're worthy of my attention. When you decipher me, when you unlock access to me, whatever the case, but like, he'd leave something, because this, I don't think he wants us to know. This is like, it's a bullshit workaround for the problem of divine hiddenness. It's saying, oh, he must not want us to know. Great, but if that's the case, then what's the difference between a God who's hiding and a God who doesn't exist? Because if he doesn't exist, same thing.
Well, it depends on what you mean by proof, because if you're using a scientific definition of proof, if you're sort of saying a proof like in maths, basically, like you have proofs that, and to give you absolute certainty of that mathematical formula works within the axiomatic language of mathematics, right? Like you have proofs. We don't have proof for anything. So if you're using it as an absolute confirmation, like something that cannot be untrue, I don't think we really have proof for anything. Maybe very, very little anyway. Maybe you get some, sort of base level brute facts kind of thing or something like that. But we don't really have proofs for anything. So the weirdest part is that he's not actually defining what's a proof and what a evidence is.
Immediately dodges the question.
Right. He's saying, oh, well, I don't think God wants us to have proof. It's like, well, you're not defining what the hell it is. Because if you're saying proof is a sort of overwhelming amount of positive evidence to the point where you believe you can't be wrong, then fine, we've got proofs for stuff. Maybe God does provide proofs for his believers or whatever. It depends. But if you have proofs as being like mathematical proofs, like absolute demonstration of the inerrancy of that belief, right? Like if that's what you're saying by proof, then we don't have proofs for anything, because science, we don't go for absolutes. We don't say, hey, evolution is absolutely true and cannot be proven false. Everything can be, shown to be false, I guess, is the one I should go for. I mean, there's local proofs, like we can falsify stuff, but I think it's very, very odd that he's not actually defining anything. Instead, he's just sort of explaining why there's very little evidence for God. I mean, let's face it, that's what he's doing.
And plugging his book.
His 18-year-old book as well. Dang,
yeah.
man.
incontrovertible evidence that we absolutely have to accept this. I think God had in mind something much more interesting and something that called more to us to make a decision, not to have it forced upon you by some mathematical proof. And maybe, what is it, Eugene Peterson said, if God wanted us to have a mathematical proof, it would have been tough to say, I love you in algebra. There's a lot more here than what you would call that sort of a proof.
I don't think that's true. Like, algebra is all about expressing values with variables. Like, I make fun of some people who say, you know, why don't we all speak mathematics? Why doesn't God speak mathematics? But like, you can express things through mathematics, especially once you incorporate variables, understanding what the variables are representational of. Like, it's been a few years, so give me a second here, but I'm pretty sure you can express I love you in algebra.
Well, I mean, you can transfer it to something like with ASCII or something like that, you know, or Unicode. You can definitely sort of, you have to first assign a value to each letter and then convert that letter to some form of binary, which is fairly straightforward. But it's more just having a conversion of each letter to some sort of value. Let's just grab a Unicode converter.
Or I did this very quickly, so I may have screwed it up. The slash isn't supposed to be there. It's 9x minus 7i is greater than 3 parentheses 3x minus 7u close parentheses, which solves to I is less than 3u, which is
I see. So you're using a sort of ASCII emoji kind of thing, presumably.
I mean, the point is understanding, though. You know, if a person understands what you're trying to say, then communication.
Okay. Well, I mean, I convert. All right. So in my case, I convert it to hexadecimal because apparently I'm the dork here. Apparently, give me 1 second. Where is the thing? Where is you?
Where is
YouTube
the
pisses me off
thing?
so much. Like I watch your channel all the time, and I swear that it tries to hide you. I think there's a conspiracy going on, quite frankly. There it is. There we go.
Oh, let's see. Oh shit, I'm in the wrong window. Okay, so you've got hexamadecimal. Jesus Christ. What does this say?
Yes, hexamadecimal. Yes, hexamadecimal. That's exactly what I've got.
Oh goodness. Oh, I'm fucking up my formula. You know, I'll just verbally say it because I can't type the damn thing for shit. 3 times sine of x minus 2 times sine of 2x plus sine of 3x equals 0, which if you graph out turns into a heart shape. I just can't seem to type the damn thing. Oh, goodness.
So I do think there's evidence, and I can tick off a few of the things that appealed to me as I was kicking and screaming, giving up my atheism and ultimately my agnosticism, because I didn't want to. Now, to recognize that there was a lot here that was hard to dismiss. Some of it, of course, is the nature of the universe and how it's put together, and we may end up talking about that.
Yeah, we will.
The fact that the universe did have a beginning, and that seems to cry.
Debatable, but I mean, that's the thing. Like, to say something with certainty when you know there isn't a certain answer to it. As a scientist, he knows there is not a certain answer. It's the same as just outright saying there is a God. It's beyond question. Yep. You can't just declare shit. You have to show us. Damn it.
Well, in fairness, like astronomy and cosmogony more specifically, like the origin of the universe, is not his speciality. I mean, he is a fantastic geneticist and biologist.
It's true, but he
He's
should
not.
still know better. Like,
Yeah,
or
that's true.
because he's such a high level scientist, avoid talking outside of his field when he doesn't know, you know?
Yeah.
Out for a cause, here we are in Kalam, and that it has this remarkable fine-tuning of all these constants.
I had a feeling he was going to go there. I mean,
Yeah,
partly
and
because he always does, but I was
yeah, and
listening
as
to
we've
an
gone
interview.
along, the universe is not as fine-tuned as we first thought.
No, most definitely. Like, stop reading Aquinas, stop reading C.S. Lewis, and pay attention to reality. And I was listening to an interview. A friend of the community, Godless Granny, had Justin from the Deconstruction Zone on, and she was talking about how does it keep doing effectively a one-man call-in show day after day after day without being like, I get so sick of the same argument over and over. And he told her a bunch of different ways that he tries to keep things spicy and so on and so forth. But he did say, if I hear the fucking fine-tuning argument one more time, I'm gonna lose it.
In fairness, it's probably their best argument. Now, it's not great, right? Like, it's not a great argument, but in fairness, it's probably the best they have. You know, so it's like you're playing baseball and they keep giving you the curveball, you know, and you keep smacking it out of the park. It's like, well, it's not great, but you know, when you're getting home runs off their I don't know baseball, their fastball all the time, of course they're going to give you the curve a lot, you know, because you get less runs off of it. Look, I'm really trying to stretch this sports metaphor, you know, like I really am.
Like a seventh inning stretch.
I don't know, and sometimes it's not about winning, it's just preventing you from winning. You know what I mean? Like if you know a curveball, yeah, you don't hit it for a home run, but you know basically make one base. That's better than giving you the fastball where all you do is hit home runs. So you know, when it's the best they've got, yeah, that's what they're going to give you all the time.
Well, at the very least, they think it's one of the best they've got.
I really think it is. It definitely is. It's sort of like this whole idea of, you know, what made life possible in the first place. Like, but it sort of leans into God of the gaps, and it leans into all of these other fallacies. It's got some definite problems there, but at the most, it's a draw, right? Like, you can't explain why the constants of the universe are such that causes that you know life can arise, and they basically can say, well, it's God, and you can say, well, you know, what's the chances of it happening? Well, it could be 100%. We don't know. But there's always, like, instead of something like, you know, look at the trees or whatever, where you can definitely point out there is a logical fallacy there, right? Like it absolutely is just begging the question. That one,
right,
you know,
and that's
doesn't
sort of my
really.
issue with it. It just is look at the trees in a more complicated form. It's saying look at the fine tuning, look at the strength of gravity, look at. Cool. I'll grant you all the things. There are trees, there are stars, there is gravity. Now show me God did it, you know?
Well, so okay, so first off, it's not like, so they're saying, hey, look at the fine tuning. It's not even, we know that it's fine tuning. That's the thing about that argument. Like, we don't know that it's fine tuning. Like a completely different universe could have arisen with very different constants, and like life would be completely different, and that you know, I don't know, that blob of jelly would be going, oh, isn't this fine tuned perfectly for me with other constants? So we don't know that to be the case, that it is fine tuned. It's just, you have to concede at least it seems to have the appearance of fine tuning. Like, for instance, even under evolution, it has the appearance of design. Now, it's not design because we understand how evolution works and how things get to having the appearance of design, but it does have the appearance of such. It's just they want to conflate the appearance with the actuality, and that isn't the case. That's not how we do things. The way that we find out things are designed is we investigate the cause and find the designer. So, we don't just go, hey, there's a pattern on this planet that must have been caused by somebody literally going and determining it and planning it out. No. We have to actually find it, because sort of geometric shapes can actually come up naturally, like snowflakes, for instance. Like, we don't find somebody crafting the snowflakes into nice patterns. They just happen naturally, even though they have, repeat with me, the appearance of design, right? They're geometrically patterned, they're symmetrical, they have all the appearance of design, and they're not designed.
Yeah, they're quite pretty. We also get similar hexagons on the poles of Saturn, for instance. But because of the way the winds swirl, it's a neat thing. You can replicate a similar thing. Take a round bucket, fill it with water, and put it on one of those. There's a term for it, but it's a platform that spins really fast, not a centrifuge. It's the thing where the thing sits in the middle. It's not important. But if you do it at different speeds, you get different patterns in the water swirling inside the spinning bucket. And sometimes you'll get a big old whirlpool, and sometimes you'll get a square shape. And if you do it at just the right speed, you'll get a hexagon. It's just Saturn is moving at a speed that produces that shape. It's just proof that Saturn is spinning. That's all that is. But it's still neat. It also kind of shows that the people who argue for fine tuning, they're not really all that interested in the truth of reality, because there's so many better examples. For example, Saturn has a pair of moons, Janus and Enceladus, I believe, who swap orbits every 4 times around. They exactly match each other's, it's 3 times for one and 4 times for the other, but whatever. They go around, and then they come to that same point in their orbits, and they just switch perfectly into the other's orbit. That's fucking weird. We have no idea why that happens or how that system came to be, but it's there. Now, that would be a much better example for fine tuning, except for the fact that it's obviously random because it doesn't happen anywhere else, But it's still like, focus on the oddities that are really cool, but they're just so not interested in finding out anything about reality. They only want to praise their imaginary friend. And so they're only interested in the easy, obvious examples they can hold up and show, look, you can't explain it, so it must be my imaginary friend and not any other possible cause. It's so frustrating. And they're missing so much of reality, which is disappointing. I get ranty sometimes. You probably noticed.
Even the astronomer Martin Rees, who's not a believer, that wonderful book he wrote about 6 numbers, seemed to have had the dial set in an exquisitely careful way in order for there to be anything interesting here, and not just a bunch of particles. So, of course, the retreat from that is the multiverse option, which is an option, but it seems to me require at least as much faith as the one that says, actually, there's an intelligence behind this that explains, Maxwell's equations that are the way in which electricity and magnetism operate. Simple, beautiful equations. As somebody who used to be in that field, first encountering Maxwell's equations, it's like, wow, this is like watching an incredible work of art being generated. Why should that be? It does seem to cry out for an intelligence. And of course, Einstein would have agreed with that part. Now we're just talking about deism, not theism. The theist part, for me,
why does it?
A lot of it comes down to
that. I don't. Like, if you're going to speak in a scientific way about these things, like when you say, it cries out for this, I don't see it as doing so. I see people crying out for it to be the case, right? I see people crying out, it's the God, but I don't see, like, evidence doesn't cry out by itself, right? Like, it just doesn't. We put our interpretation onto that. Like I find his language, like outside of his field, to be really, really dodgy.
Yeah, it's odd. Like whenever people start praising the beauty of math shows that there must be a designer. As we've mentioned many times on this show before, there was a designer. It's humans. Humans came up with math. It's infuriating. We're very clever monkeys. It doesn't mean there's fucking magic. If there were magic, we wouldn't need all the complicated formulas. We'd need complicated potion recipes or something, you know? Like it wouldn't be this way if there were magic.
The moral law, the idea that there's good and evil, and the ability to try to explain that purely on the basis of evolutionary psychology.
That's another human idea. Monkeys don't think of good and evil. Sharks don't think of good and evil. That's a thing humans came up with, not an objective feature of reality. There's so much. What is it when you project? Oh, it's like ethnocentrism, but on a species level onto all of reality.
Anthropocentrism. It's like anthropomorphic thinking.
It's almost like the anthropic thing, you know, the universe must exist for us because we exist in it to observe it.
Anthropocentric.
It's frustrating is what it is.
Yeah, it's like anthropocentric. It's regarding humankind as a central and most important element in existence.
He's got a big freaking bias like right in front of his nose, and he can't see it, and nobody else is pointing it out to him. It's amazing he's gotten as much science done as he can. But I mean, if you can find stuff that's compatible with your bias, then the bias doesn't interfere with your ability to do other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, falls short of me. It doesn't explain the kind of radical altruism that we as humans tend to admire when we see it, and which is sometimes a scandal to evolution. Why should that be? So the moral law, and then the whole phenomenon of beauty.
What? So this is his field, and he's deliberately misunderstanding evolution.
Evolution promotes cooperation in social species. What are you talking about? Like, yeah, and we can be incredibly generous towards those of our in-group, and then be absolutely savage to people in our out-group. Like, you must have noticed that, this incredible altruism, and it's like, yeah, and savage cruelty. Oh, but that one's the devil. Yeah, okay, sure, buddy.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not even a human thing either. You know, like we see that sort of thing, and there's freaking fish where one fish will sacrifice its life for another fish that isn't even related to it. Do fish have morality? Is it an evolutionary drive for? But also we see cruelty too. Not super common, not as much as you know, primates, especially our flavor of primate, where there seems to be a strain of us that seeks out cruelty and opportunities to be mean for no real reason. But we do see it elsewhere in nature, like a predator who will kill just to make things die, even if it's not hungry, for instance.
Yes, I too have owned a cat.
Yes. That wasn't what I was thinking of, but you're absolutely right. I used to have a cat who was an indoor-outdoor cat, and he would go kill things and then bring them home and like not eat them. Yeah. You just like, look what I killed.
Or just play with its food and get bored. You know, like cats are savage.
They can be.
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess all of evolution is bunk because there's both kindness and cruelty throughout all of nature.
But let's just look at the altruism, say, hey, that's a special thing. There must be a God because altruism exists. Okay.
hmm Okay, so
Not sure I'm
is
buying
there
that
a
one,
god of
Collins.
altruism? Maybe we should worship that god. I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I don't find it easy to dismiss experiences that sort of lift me out of myself, which for me is often music. This exquisite longing, poignant longing that's inspired in your whole being by a particular beautiful piece of music. It feels like it's some kind of an outreach to your very soul. And I don't know how to explain that on the basis of neuroscience, although I imagine neuroscience will find there is some properties of the brain that supports it. So again, not a proof, but for me
Sorry.
at 27, having...
You're using music making you feel as evidence of a god. Like, we know there are some sounds that humans just cannot stand, like nails down a blackboard kind of thing. Like, it's a horrible sound. You know, there's hypotheses around why that is, you know, like it's similar to the frequency of sound given by a baby crying, so you want to go and stop it as soon as possible. You know, like there's some ideas about why it happens, but you know, like I don't like I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Like the idea that hey, music makes you feel. If what has that got to do with anything? Because you know, a
Like
friend of
George
mine may listen to music and be like, "This is wonderful. It makes me feel awesome," and I go, "Wow, this is the most boring song I've ever heard." Right? It purely seems to be subjective taste.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what it is. Like someone may listen to death metal and go, "This is the best song ever. I'm so amped up," and I'm like, "Man, this is just noise to me." You know, like I used to like death metal in an angry phase. I don't care for it anymore. Like, and tastes change. So what the hell is that? Like, I don't. None of this. Like, if this is your first thing you're bringing up as evidence, and let me remind you. Okay, let me remind you. The question was, how do you define proof and how do you define evidence?
He's just it's the
Right.
old man trope, right? Like grandpa, let's
Yeah.
get home.
Yeah. This guy, I'm really sorry, Francis Collins, I loved your work on genetics. This kind of stuff is what used to drive you crazy on a phone call when you were working and you were talking to a customer and they just started to ramble off about their home or something. And it's like I understand you haven't talked to somebody in a while, but holy shit, can we get back on track?
We've got shit to do, man.
Yeah.
walked down this trail bit by bit, realizing that my arguments of strict atheism really couldn't be sustained. I got to that place where I had to decide whether to take the leap. There was no going back. That had already crumbled behind me. The only real alternative was to stay in this awkward, uncertain space, or to say, okay, I find it no longer possible to stay there and to resist.
Yeah, that's good.
Trust you.
Cool, I guess. I mean, it
I-
does take a certain amount of intellectual resolve to be willing to stand there and say, I don't know until you
Right.
show me otherwise. Because there's a
Yes.
lot of pressure to accept this group or that group or
Sure.
whatever's demands that their way is the only way. But how do you tell which way is the true way, if any of them?
And I think that there is a problem with one of the many problems with humans is that we don't like not knowing. We don't like admitting that we don't know something. It seems like a weakness to us, like especially in scientific fields. And I think that is why you get so many scientists talking outside their field. And just I'm going to mention something, okay? Like, for instance, Lawrence Krauss. He is a frigging complete asshat, and we found out more and more about what a absolutely disgusting human being he is. And he is a physicist, right? Like, but he did a debate 11 months ago on fucking morality. Okay, so
What?
I'm not even joking. Went on, you know, Garbage Fire Central, or, you know, as it's more commonly known, Modern Day Debate, 11 months ago, and did a debate on morality, Since then, we found out that he's in the Epstein files. He was asking Epstein advice on how to rehabilitate his image after all of the allegations came out about him, doing horrible things to women. For a start, okay, just this is an aside, okay? I'm doing a Francis Collins. Just an aside. How the fuck do you do these awful things and then think you can go on and debate about morality? Like, it is insane to me that somebody, like, it just boggles my mind that somebody can be that brazen. Like, I remember doing one of my very first debates because, I was over at Praise I Am, giving them a hard time over at the Christian channel, going into their room, watching them blow up, that kind of thing. And I debated someone called Smokey Saint. It came out later that he was engaging in, trying to underage thing, the whole deal, right? And I just thought, how do you do that? How do you do something that awful and then go, well, I'm going to debate morality now? And
Because
11 months
then
ago
there's a
was,
problem.
yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. But, so obviously Lawrence fucking Krauss is not qualified to debate on morality in any way, shape, or form. I'm sorry, he just is not. Okay, he is. But there's this idea that these people have when they get to a certain proficiency in like pop science, that they never say I don't know about this or I don't know about that. That they want an answer for everything. And I think that Francis Collins here has sort of fallen victim to it. He can't sit with the, oh, well, I don't know if there's a God or not. It doesn't feel like, because if people go, what do you think on the God question? He can't just go, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
He has to be maybe that he's got an answer. Because he's sitting there going, oh, I had to make a decision one way or the other. Do you?
I wonder if you read Josh McDowell's book, because that's
which
the kind of language you get from there. The evidence that demands a verdict. It's like, well, here's the evidence. It demands a verdict. I can't say I don't know. I have to decide because it's propaganda.
That's bullcrap. That's bullcrap. Mm-hmm. I think, the principle of divine hiddenness sort of enforces that you don't have the evidence that demands an answer, right? That there always has to be a leap of faith. There always has to be a leap of faith, because God's not going to give you, overwhelming evidence that would make a conclusion. You've got to take the step in believing something without the evidence. That's the whole premise of divine hiddenness, right? That he's not going to give you the proof or the overwhelming evidence. He is going to require you to believe without truly a good reason.
For fun.
So I reject that entire premise that evidence makes you have to go one way or the other. I reject that.
Yeah,
I absolutely
so
reject
gross.
that.
If you truly believe that the answer to whether or not there's a God, which God, how you should worship, all of that stuff, if you truly believe it is one of the most important questions in your entire life, to just to just not be able to say I don't know and just jump on board with something that you're very not sure of, what are you doing?
Well, and plus, I think if there are convincing arguments on both sides, and you're weighing up evidence on both sides. Look, I don't mind if someone says, "Hey, to me, the evidence on this side outweighed the evidence on that side, and I became convinced." That's fine. But whenever they start to talk about a leap of faith, it worries me, because at that point the evidence is lacking. Because if the evidence was sufficient, you wouldn't need a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't need that
provisional belief, like say I'm on this God until better evidence comes along.
Right, absolutely.
Why not just be agnostic then? Like, because that's as I've said many times, there's been some weird shit that's happened in my life, and that's true for a lot of other people too. Stuff that, at least based on our current understanding, we can't actually explain. I'm fine saying I don't know about that stuff, but I'd be willing to consider a God that actually showed itself. I'm not completely closed to the possibility of the supernatural. I just need to see it.
I mean, when I was a lot younger, I used to tell people, do you believe in God? And I used to say, well, I believe in something, right? Like, I believe there is more to the world than the physical, because I came out of my family, or my mother more specifically, was just sort of into light woo, like astrology and crystals and, aromatherapy and, crap like that. So I sort of went, well, I believe in something, right? There's something more than the material scientific we've been presented kind of thing. But as I sort of got older, I realized, well, if I believe in something other than what science and stuff tells us, we're discovering more and more things, right? And what I found is that the thing that I said was, oh, well, this must be some sort of mystical, spiritual thing that connects people. Well, what if that's just the things that science hasn't discovered yet? And if those things that science hasn't discovered yet, are the things that I'm saying, then what am I saying? All I'm saying is, hey, yeah, I think there's something. There's stuff that we haven't discovered yet. A, that doesn't make it a god, and B, it doesn't make it spiritual. It just means there's stuff we haven't discovered yet, right? That could be completely material and completely understandable to science. We just haven't discovered it yet. And so when you start to realize that, you're like, well, all I'm doing is putting a magic-shaped mask on something completely mundane. Like, I'm just saying, oh, this stuff, quantum entanglement, that must be magic, like, no, it's not magic. We just don't understand it yet. That's completely mundane.
I mean, it could be magic.
It could be magic. It could be. But there's no reason to believe it's magic just because we don't understand it. That is sort of like God of the Gaps, but it is sort of an argument from ignorance. We don't know what it is, so it must be magic. That is the argument from ignorance. And contradictory on its face, because you're saying you don't know what it is and then proceeding to say what it is.
Right. Like, one of the first things, tangent, Matt Dillahunty, when I first came across the atheist experience, thanks Forrest, I saw an old episode with Matt Dillahunty and Tracy Harris, and he was talking to someone, a caller, who made an argument from ignorance. And he said, here's the thing, you're claiming ignorance, but you're saying, I don't know, and therefore I do know, and the answer is magic. And that's just not warranted.
Right. It's like the people that say, hey, we don't know how they built the pyramids. I mean, we do, but, people say that we don't know how they built the pyramids, but so it must have been aliens. But that is inherently contradictory, because when you say we don't know, you are then following it up with saying that you know, and here is the reason.
Now, I wish I had. So Brie produces a lot of great commercials. There's a lot of backstory I want to get into, but TLDR, she made a new commercial for Dr. Ben because he's been making soaps for the last few months, and his latest one is ready. It's Roswell. It's an alien thing, and so she put Ben's face on that Dr. Don guy from the History Channel, and so he's holding up the thing, and he's like, "It is aliens.
It is aliens." Yeah, I'm not saying it's aliens, but aliens.
Yeah.
Wow, that guy.
God, to meet me on the other side of that gap.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke a lot of different areas, philosophical arguments, science. I'm curious how you go about this process. You had a couple of videos on your YouTube channel, arguments for atheism and arguments for theism as well. And so I'm just curious to unpack your mind on like how you think about this in terms of evidence and reason and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, when I say that I'm violently agnostic, I'm talking about the existence of God. I don't know what God is. I don't know what this word is supposed to refer to, right? And if you
Francis is like, don't look at me.
Yeah.
I'm sure he exists, but
I-
I don't know what that means.
And he didn't really, to me, he didn't really answer the question of evidence and proof, the difference between them. I mean, I would have just sort of been saying that evidence is sort of facts and demonstrated facts that are indicative of one conclusion, kind of thing. Like that's evidence, and proof is incontrovertible evidence that shows the inerrancy of any belief, kind of thing. And I think that it all depends, but he just sort of said, hey, this is why I believe in a god, because I came to a fork in the road where I had evidence for both, and then went, well, I've got to make a leap of faith. And that kind of, I mean, it shows a flaw in the decision making, when you are just going, well, I've got to believe in one, and then you're basically building in a bias, right? You're basically going, well, I'm going to construct a bias towards one, and then get it confirmed afterwards. To me, that's what a leap of faith is. It is implementing a bias in your life.
I see it slightly differently. I see it as like,
Okay.
why do people choose the religion that is similar to the religion of the people around them? Like, why not choose? I mean, some people do choose
Okay.
a totally different religion for whatever reason. But often when it's someone in a position like Francis was describing, a situation like that, they tend to choose the religion of the people around them, because the reason they feel like they need to make a choice is because they feel like they're excluded from the people around them by this lack. So the actual leap of faith is leaping to join the rest of the people. All of it is just part of being more closely tied to your in-group, your society, your culture, whatever you want to look at it as. And the religion is just a mask. It's an identifier. It's a stamp on the forehead, to use Christian terminology, that you're allowed in this kingdom. Okay.
So you think it's sort of cultural, sort of normative cultural acceptance, rather than, sort of saying, hey, I'm going to take a sort of, I'm going to believe in this thing first, and then, I gotcha. And it may be both. It may be a case of like all kinds of reasons. It's kind of it's kind of a meme among atheists, but the amount of times we've seen an atheist get a partner who's a Christian, and then they suddenly convert, is actually quite hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa,
Oh, yeah. People change things up quite a bit. There was, where was it? A person who was talking to a person. So Eastern Orthodox, there's a tradition, in order to be a proper Orthodox Eastern Orthodox, you can't just convert. You have to take a 1-year period of like learning the teachings and traditions and whatnot. And during that period, you have to say you're converting to Eastern Orthodox, but you're not actually Eastern Orthodox yet.
Right.
Which is, they're not exclusive. Like, when you're converting to Judaism, you have to spend that period to like learn the Torah and shit, so you can like properly be an active. So it's not exclusive to Eastern Orthodox. But the last person I came across who was in that position was doing it because they were getting married, not because they were convinced that Eastern Orthodoxy was the true form of Christianity, or that even Christianity was true. It was because they were getting married to someone who is Eastern Orthodox. And we see it all the time. Like, there's oh my goodness, there's so many people. The big famous apologists, right? Like J. Warner Wallace. He investigated. He was an atheist, but he investigated because his wife caught religion, and he was like, well, I'm going to show her it's not true. And he ends up converting rather than getting a divorce, weirdly enough. And then he has to come up with a bunch of reasons why it's true,
Yeah, I'd say I'd label, lump that under motivated reasoning, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of tales like this. Like out of the 5 most famous apologists right now, one is William Lane Craig, and the other 4 are I used to be an atheist and then I got married, you know? Say lovey.
I remember, like, for some reason this stuck out to me. I was speaking to somebody once who's not really into philosophy or science or anything. And we were just talking, and he sort of said, yeah, well, you know, I don't believe in God, and carried on talking. And something about the way he said it, I just thought to myself, what is the thing that you have in your head when you say that? Like, what is the referent for the word God there? What is the thing that you don't believe in? The cliche is for the Christian to find out and say, well, guess what? I don't believe in that God either, you know, whatever it is that you have in mind. But it's true, because God is, if we listen to the way that God is described in Scripture, but also in the traditional philosophical schools of thought, it's not the man in the sky, but it's also not like a creative mind. I mean, Aquinas would say that God is not even powerful. God is not like loving. God is not knowing. God is not any of those things, because those are all just analogous terms that somewhat approximate the kind of thing that God might be like. Right? And so if there is a God, I think it's sort of far beyond comprehension. And so my agnosticism is partly due to that. I think that without the guidance of some form of scripture, the reason we know that we can use these analogies accurately, even if we can't understand the thing they point to, is because we have it on the authority of someone like Jesus. The problem is that my agnosticism doesn't extend to religious traditions like Christianity. Those I unfortunately do think are false. At the very least, I don't think there's good enough evidence to believe in the truth claims of Christianity, the crucial parts of the resurrection, for example. That's a sticking point for a lot of people. That brings a lot of people to faith. It doesn't do it for me. Also, the moral qualms, the same moral intuition that I'm told I'm supposed to.
So he's starting to move on to morality, and there's stuff to be said there too. But before he gets too far along, that is sort of the sticking point. That's why there's these conversations in the first place. Because while very thoughtful agnostics like Alex are like, well, I can't be sure about gods. Like, I don't have a way to know for certain. But when you get to a specific tradition like Christianity, then yeah, that's demonstrably false. You know,
yeah. So
again,
that's
conversation from earlier with just.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. He's been arguing that Jesus didn't fulfill any prophecies. Like, not fulfilling one prophecy is enough to call his messianic status into question. But you can make an argument that he didn't fulfill any of them. So what is Christianity then but a failed prophecy?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but so Alex is describing local versus global, and the way that he's using agnosticism and atheism is really philosophy of religion. So, like, colloquially, we'll just say, hey, we're all atheists. Even we'll sort of lump agnostics into it and say agnostic atheists will sort of say, well, I don't know if there's a God. You know, I just don't believe in a God, but I don't think, I don't make the claim that a God doesn't exist. Gnostic atheists like myself will say, hey, I know there is no God. I've got a justified reason that I believe is true of why God does not in fact exist. So we'll actually make that claim kind of thing, and then be prepared to back it up with some form of argument. But I know Matt Delahunty sort of says, oh, why make that claim if you don't have to? It just puts you in a weaker position. It's because that's what I believe. Like, this is the thing. I don't see your position as being, well, which is the most strategically beneficial to you. I think that you should talk on what you actually believe and be honest about your actual position, even if that is taking on some kind of burden. But, I mean, I disagree with that, but hey, I don't, it doesn't worry me. But the way he's talking is philosophy of religion, where an agnostic is different from an atheist, that an atheist thinks or says a God does not exist, right? They take the burden on to say, no, I'm saying there is no God. An agnostic says, I don't know if there's a God or not. So it's based upon a proposition. The proposition, is there a God? An atheist is someone that says no, and an agnostic is someone that says, I don't know. So he's talking a bit differently than you may have heard them, but it's fine. Like, the words, they have multiple meanings. It doesn't really matter. It's just philosophy of religion. They're defined in very sort of strict ways. I'm not saying either is right. I think that words have multiple meanings depending on context, and they're all fine. As long as you know someone's position, it's fine. So let's not have a fight over which is the real definition of agnosticism and atheism. It's as stupid as having a argument over what's the real definition of fish. You know, like it's pointless. As long as you understand what somebody means, it doesn't really matter. They're just using it in a different way. So let's not fight about that. Let's just say,
Right.
hey, if that's the way you want to use it, that's fine. I understand what you mean by it. And what he's basically saying is that he has local atheism, right? So local just meaning, hey, Christianity, Islam, these specific God claims for each religion, he thinks they're false, right? Like he is actually saying, no, I think your specific God does not exist, right? But global sort of agnosticism is saying, hey, I don't think any of these religions' gods exist, but I don't know if there's some deistic God or some overarching God concept that does exist. So it's sort of agnosticism versus atheism and global versus local. And so you can reject every local claim, and he's sort of saying, I'm still an agnostic because I don't know if there's some form of God out there or not. I would just, to me, it's kind of odd because, it's kind of like saying, well, I don't believe you saw Bigfoot in the woods, but I don't know if some vague Bigfoot concept out there exists, some magical Bigfoot creature exists, right? I think that at a certain point when, like, I understand local versus global claims, and you're basically saying, hey, I don't believe you specifically, but I don't know of the larger concept. I think at a certain point, we've got to say, well, it's completely antithetical to our understanding of how the world works and how things operate, that you should be confident in saying, well, I don't believe a God exists, right? And if it does, then you've got to present me with the evidence to show that I'm wrong. Because we're basically saying that there is some form of mind out there that, you can't see, can't touch, is completely unfalsifiable, that works in opposition to how we understand minds to work. And, we're sort of saying, hey, this violates everything we know about life and minds and all of the systems that we've discovered. But I'm going to say I don't know it exists. It seems odd to me. I would say at that point, when you're sort of saying, hey, there's a mind with no body whatsoever, but it's more complex than any mind ever found, which goes against what we found in nature, which is, you need a brain for a mind, and the more complex the brain, the more complex the mind. You're saying it doesn't exist at all, and it's more complex still, going against that. I think at that point, I'm confident in saying, no, this thing does not exist. I can say with, at least have a justification and believe the thing doesn't exist. And sure, if I'm wrong, show me the Bigfoot, show me this Bigfoot. But I not only don't believe your claim, but until presented with some concept that is even coherent with what we understand, I don't believe any claim of a God. I'm happy to be wrong, though.
That's a big thing that we also keep stressing over the years, but it does have to be insisted upon. We like being wrong, or shown to be wrong, rather.
Yes.
So we can learn something, so we can do better, so we can stop being wrong. And that's a huge difference between our side generally, the pro-science, let's say atheistic agnosticists who want to know true things and reject false things, and the general theistic side of things, which is, I want to be right. Whether it's true or not matters less than me being right. We want what's true, and the other side wants to be right. And therein lies a bit of a gulf that sometimes is difficult to bridge. Which may be why the interviewer wanted to start with defining things, because if our priorities are in completely different directions, then we aren't necessarily going to find common ground to do the bridge on.
rely upon to prove the existence of God is that same moral intuition that I'm supposed to ignore when I encounter the less than enviable situations of the Canaanites
Yeah, Old
or
Testament.
Hebrew slaves or non-Hebrew slaves, to make things worse. But also in the New Testament, the treatment of women is something that raises a lot of eyebrows. Interestingly, I think the atheist has an escape route there, because I think that Paul didn't write a lot of what we find attributed to Paul in the New Testament, but that's not really an option for the New Testament trusting Christian. So I'm sort of the one who can absolve Paul here. I don't think he wrote those words in 1 Corinthians where he says that women should, if they have a question, they should go home and ask their husbands. It's a disgrace to speak in church. I don't think he wrote those words, and I think we have good evidence to think he didn't.
Yep.
I don't think he.
No, what he's referring to here is the what do they call him? Pseudo-Paul? That's probably not
Yes.
quite right, but it's in the neighborhood. Something like half of Paul's letters the scholars are pretty sure are forgeries. A Christian
Yes.
can't say that because they have to believe the whole Bible. But from a scholarly perspective, yeah, Paul may have been an asshole, but he wasn't that particular type of asshole.
And when Paul was around in the early church, we know there was a lot of opportunities for women, that women had opportunities that other religions did not give them, which is part of the reason why it took off so much, why it was very alluring to the populace. Not only did it empower the poor, which, it certainly did, it also had, women could have status within the church and lead congregations and things like that. So we know that sort of this very anti-woman bias that happened throughout the sort of later millennium and into the sort of Middle Ages kind of thing, we know that that wasn't part of the early church. And part of the, because Christians will say to you, oh, well, if it's not true, how come it took off so much? And there's other reasons apart from it is true that Jesus rose from the dead, that it could have taken off. And one of the things was that it empowered the poor. Very popular with the poor if your religion is empowering you or your philosophy is empowering you. Two, it gave a lot of status for women. So it was very, very popular for women because, hey, it actually supported them having some measure of autonomy, which is wild that now we're sort of looking at it going, well, it's the Christians that are restricting women's autonomy, like it's wild. But the technical term for what he's talking about is interpolation. It's where the later church comes in and attributes writings to various people across the place in order to promote their version of Christianity. And we see this a lot in like Josephus's writing, right? Where there's a very out of place sort of paragraph in his writings that sort of talk about Jesus the Messiah. And the problem with that is that Josephus died a Jew, a very, very fervent Jew. And, he wasn't a Christian. So if he thought that Jesus was the Messiah, he wouldn't have been such a fervent, Jewish guy later in his life. He wouldn't be on board with all of them.
That's one of the problems. Obviously, that's
Yeah,
an insurmountable problem. If he really believed in Jesus, he would have been Christian. But the other problem is that paragraph doesn't appear until Origen's 4th century copy of Josephus.
Right.
And while none of these old copies of Josephus persist because it's very old, we have copies of copies today. Other historians at the time pointed out that every other copy of Josephus didn't say that, almost like Origen inserted it himself.
Yes. And it also doesn't flow with the way that Josephus wrote as well. Like it seems very out of place, and like if you change it to say something different, it actually fits in a lot better. There's a lot of reasons why we think that Josephus had interpolation inserted into it by the church. And so it may be the case that the Bible, well, we know that the Bible had interpolation. We know that because of the long ending of Mark. The section from, I think it's Mark 16 from memory, or Mark 19. I can't remember which one, but I think it's Mark 19. That sort of 9 to 20 where it says that Christians will be able to handle snakes and drink poison, and you'll know the Christians because they won't fall sick and die. That was added in later, and we know that because we thought that was just, you know, the Bible, Mark's gospel, until we found earlier copies, and the early copies don't have those sentences in it. That does not have it. It ends at sort of 9, and that's it. And so we know that was added later, and that brings up a really valid question, which is, how do we know what else was added to the Bible? We
Or delete
don't. Or delete it, sure. Because we don't have the original copies. We don't have any kind of way, like as Bart Ehrman points out, and I think very astutely so, that it may be the case. We don't know for sure, but it may be the case that, hey, maybe some of the things on the Sermon on the Mount, you know, the famous speech by Jesus, he didn't actually say. Or he said more and it's just not there, because either the church took it out or put something in. Like, because if we can think that Mark ends at 20 and then find out, oh, it actually ended at 9 and somebody put more in it, then what does that say about the rest of the Bible?
It makes me think of, considering it's Black History Month, there's been a lot of talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and his famous I Have a Dream speech. It was famous. There were a lot of witnesses. We have recordings of it, of course, but if we didn't have recordings, we're about as far from Martin Luther King's death as the gospel writers were, the earlier gospel writers were from Jesus's. So if you took people today and had them try to write the I Have a Dream speech from memory, you may end up with something kind of like the Sermon on the Mount. Perhaps.
Look, I did not know it was Black History Month. I truly apologize. It's a really good thing. I reject completely. I know this is a tangent, but I reject the idea of remembering history and the transgressions of history as just bringing up divisive stuff as absolutely ridiculous argument. You know, there is no way to fix a problem without addressing the problem. And I think that sort of remembering the cultural origins of a people is essential in knowing why we have a problem today. You know, we can't just pretend that this stuff didn't happen. It is ridiculous to say it causes divisiveness. I do not, you know, I feel like, because we sort of remember what happened to the Australian native people, the Aboriginal people here, and it does not make me feel like we are further apart than those people, you know.
Yeah.
I reject white guilt. I want people to embrace white responsibility.
Yeah, it's such a bullshit thing to be like, oh, you're trying to guilt. No, we don't.
No.
Nobody wants people today to feel. We went through this whole thing when I was a child. Oh, why should we feel bad about slavery? You shouldn't. You didn't have slaves.
No. Yes.
But you do have to acknowledge that because of the bullshit situation that used to obtain, some people have been fucked over. And if you really believe in an even playing field, we have to take steps to address that.
Yes. There is no way to fix a problem that you do not acknowledge exists. And the first step to existing it is saying, hey, here's how we got to this situation. Here's how we got to this problem. And how do we fix it? I don't know, but pretending it's not there is not going to do jack shit.
Yeah, the divisive. I did a small rant on one of the recent transfactuals that I've been thinking about, like, making into not exactly a short, it's too long for a short, but like a regular video that's of shorter length kind of thing. But it's about this, the way the right is propagandizing everything in the US. Like, For instance, the situation in Minneapolis where they'll shoot citizens in the face. And then when there's protests in response to that, they'll say, see, look how violent the left is with all these protests, ignoring the fact that it was their actual violence that precipitated the protests.
And it's getting such a blurry line between like law enforcement, or whatever parody of law enforcement that ICE is, and military, because you look at them and you go, well, that's a fucking militia. Like that looks military. It doesn't look like law enforcement. And when you're covering your face and not giving, you don't have any body cam, you don't have any identification on you, and sometimes they're not even marked as police. It's incredible that you're saying, well, they're law enforcement. No, they don't look like law enforcement at all. So I don't know. It's really, really weird. I don't know what's happening over there. But if masked agents showed up in my neighborhood with and started doing what they're doing, I would be absolutely pissed as well. Yeah.
But we do digress.
And yeah, Perps, I do think there needs to be more. And Purple said something really prescient, that there needs to be more recognition of Native Americans and what they have been through. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we still could do a lot better. As Kelly said, Black History all year. And in fact, I was wondering the other day why. I understand the need to single out a month to focus on, but why is there a month? I understand that there has to be one because Black people have been pushed out of regular history.
Right.
For some reason, it's all white people. I can't imagine why. But we need to do more to be inclusive as we go forward as well. We still have a long way to go, folks, especially with the regressives trying to haul us backwards.
I agree, Irish. They do look like paramilitary. Absolutely right. Yes. That's what they look like. A paramilitary group, yes.
Book of First Timothy. And so a lot of those problems would go away for me. But if I'm looking at the Christian religion, that moral intuition that so powerfully tells people, well, certain things are right or wrong. You know it. Even if you want to sort of try to psychologize it or talk about evolution or anything, somewhere that there's a moral feeling that certain things are right or wrong. And even if I say, okay, sure, yeah, great. So what does that mean I should do? Well, that should lead you to Christianity. And then the first thing I see opening that book is something which contradicts the very moral intuition that I was supposed to use to get there in the first place. That leaves me with some cause for concern. When it comes to the actual existence of God, the fine-tuning and the first cause type stuff, I'm kind of okay with this. What are we thinking about God as being? If we think of God as someone who's sort of finely tuning constants, the strong and weak nuclear forces and the gravitational constant, sort of almost like typing them all into a computer or something, then we're starting to imagine God as more of this sort of intervening agency, which is what I was trying to avoid before. I do have specific responses to each of these arguments, by the way. So the fine tuning,
we'll get
the first cause stuff, whatever, which we can do.
Yeah.
But just as a broad overview, I find it impossible to really say what would count as evidence or proof of God's existence, because I don't even know what this God figure is.
Yeah.
But I do know that the religious traditions that have sprung up in response to apprehension of the divine have given me cause for concern.
Yeah, I mean, well,
and that's some. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say it's inconceivable to me that you would conceptualize this idea of God as the all-powerful creator who programmed in the fine constants and caused all of this to be, but that same entity had to trick a woman into carrying a mortal form of him so that he could grow up and then sacrifice himself to get around rules that he was in charge of in the first place. They're not compatible. These are wildly different versions of a divine being. It makes no goddamn sense.
Well, I think that sort of what he's pointing at is that he's sort of agnostic about a deistic God, but when they sort of go down to the specifics, that, like you say, it's like this weird sort of, we had to put Adam and Eve in the garden and stuff like that. He's doing things in the real world that we know that aren't true. You know, like our lineage didn't start with Adam and Eve. So I think it's really important that we remember that it's not on us to define God. You know, I mean, I had a definition of God that I was using in debate and stuff because they're like, oh, well, how do you define God? And it's like, well, God is. I'll try to remember what I sort of said. It was an agent, so something with agency. It could make decisions. An agent with sufficient power to transgress or alter the laws of nature, or the laws of physics, or something along those lines, basically, and encompassed all gods like Zeus. It encompassed, you know, I think, transcendent agent with the necessary power to violate or alter the laws of nature. So basically, I'm pointing to something that makes decisions, is intelligent, can change the very substance of the universe, kind of thing. So, but you know, it shouldn't be upon us atheists to define what a god is. Like, it shouldn't be upon us to say, oh, well, this is a god. You know, and it's weird because my definition of God was usually better than their definition of God. And I acknowledge it's incredibly loose. It could be anything from, you know, Buddha to, you know, a Zoroastrian god, or, you know, the god of classical theism. It really is just a very loose definition to encapsulate all concepts of God out there, because I don't believe in any of them. So, you know, but you'll get this sort of fuzzy response of what a god is. You'll either get a targeted religious answer or the fuzziest answer you could ever imagine. Like, you know, you'll either get, well, it's Jesus Christ who's outlined in the Bible, you know, the very, very specific rising from the dead and all of this stuff, or, oh, it can't be described. You know, like, it really is one or the other. It's never just, you know, something that is well formulated to be a this with all of these you know, properties assigned to it, very orderly, like, you know, like I gave, like, you know, an omniscient, omnipotent agent with the ability to do, you know, that was responsible for creation. You'll never hear that. You'll either hear Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, or some nebulous thing like our conscience and the idea of goodness, kind of thing. Like, this is what you'll hear.
Began to exist.
You know, it really is one or the other. I never find good definitions of God out there, and I think that's partly, you know, I can understand why O'Connor would be frustrated with that, because you never get a solid definition of God, and it's always nebulous. It's always changing. They usually use the Mott and Bailey kind of thing. Oh, they can't prove Jesus. Well, let's just say God's just this, you know, almost you know, abstraction kind of thing. You know, they will retreat to a deistic God when they can't prove they're Jesus, and it's just frustrating.
Left-handed Jedi has a proposition. He sends a super chat for $5. Thank you, Jedi. And says, my answer to the question, what would make you believe, is simple. I wake up and every body in our solar system is now in a perfectly circular orbit.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think there's a million good answers out there. I think that's one of many. Like, somebody said, oh, if you saw your name written in the sky saying Mark, believe in God, would that convince you? And it's like, well, yes, with an asterisk. If we investigated and found that did not happen naturally, right? There is no explanation for it whatsoever. That would be really good evidence, you know. And I agree, if we, you know, if we investigated and there was a natural cause, like, you know, a rogue planet had gone through our solar system, adjusted everything's trajectories, and we could understand through physics how it just happened to cause everything in alignment, then no, I wouldn't believe in a God. But if we found, hey, nothing seemed to cause this, yeah, I would agree, Jedi. That's good evidence for a God. And there's a million of these, like if you chopped my head off and suddenly I was back alive, would that make you believe in a God? And I would be like, yeah, well, I'd want to investigate. And that's the part that they miss. I wouldn't just believe it on its face value, but if we investigate and go, hey, there is no possible way that that could have happened except for something else, then yeah, that would be good evidence. And I would say, hey, yeah, I'd probably believe in a God at that point. But the point is, they always point to stuff that never happens, right? They always go, well, if a meteorite dropped from the sky and it said, I am Yahweh, Mark, believe in me, yeah, when that happens, it would be convincing. But it never happens. That's the whole point. And I think they're just sort of...
Why doesn't it happen then?
Right. So I think that
my issue is if you find something impossible where supernatural is the only likely cause, the only believable cause, I suppose. Cool. Now what? Which God did it? Like, how do you know which God to believe in based on these miracles? If it's any that humans have come up with in any case.
Well, my meteorite example did have I am Yahweh written on it. So in that case, right, that's, some... Yeah. But yeah, I get what you mean, though. But,
Jesus on the bottom of the thing.
I mean, I do like Matt Delahunty's response. I'm bringing up Matt Delahunty a lot. I'm not sure why. I just, maybe he's addressed a lot of this stuff. He sort of said, I don't know, but God would know. Well, that's true. Like, God would know what would convince me. And I don't mind that answer. That's a perfectly reasonable answer. That God would know what is sufficient to convince me. But I think that there's this, theists will jump on that and sort of say, see, you've got biased, you're never going to be convinced kind of thing. And I think that's wrong. I think that if some of these things happen to me, I would probably turn into a believer. Right. And you might say, oh, but you might be tricked. Yeah. But if we investigated and, nobody could explain why a meteorite saying, I am Yahweh, believe in me, Mark, dropped from the sky, it wasn't human made. It was a substance we didn't like. If all of this happened, I think I would believe. But that has never happened to me. Sorry, go ahead, Ember. I know you got a super chat to do.
Yeah. Robin, our wonderful debate-loving friend, who I believe just had another debate, so she's been getting in the ring, sends us a super chat for $2. Thank you, Robin, and says, ever receding gap in scientific understanding. And it's interesting. I noticed earlier when Francis was talking, he specifically referred to his faith as a gap, and he's just believes that God will meet him on the other side.
Yeah.
Just wild. I also where'd it go?
Yeah, that was a famous quote. I can't remember who said it. I'm mentally blanking, but so sort of somebody said that, hey, if God is just what we don't understand, then God is just the ever receding sort of gap in scientific knowledge that we have, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It may have been Hitchens. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe Robin knows, but it definitely was, somebody that quite astutely, Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? So, it really does, it means that God is just becoming less and less powerful, less and less every single year as our scientific knowledge grows. And I completely agree with him.
Yeah, as Tommy points out, apparently Tommy hasn't met you because he said earlier, I like this Mark fellow. So Tommy, meet Mark.
Hello.
He's been around the community for a while. He and I do these debate shows every Saturday. We take turns every other, well, my Saturday. It's Sunday for Mark because he's in Upside Down land. But
it's true.
But
I am upside down.
Every other week we're on his channel, and then the opposite week we're over here unless something comes up, which doesn't happen often, but does from time to time. And bunch of good stuff. So yay. But yes, you had a point. God doesn't have to be that elaborate. He could just show up. Just ta-da.
Well, I mean, it depends. But then you have to get into how he shows up. Like, if he just shows up as a person and says, "Hey, I'm God," we probably wouldn't believe him. But if he shows up and does a bunch of miracles, then that we just cannot explain. It's been thoroughly investigated. And that's my point. My point is that theists just sort of say, hey, if you saw this, would you believe in a God? And it's like, no, if I just saw, I've seen magic shows that seem completely inexplicable, right? Like I've seen stuff that seems inexplicable, but once we investigate, we find out there's a perfectly rational explanation for it. So no, I wouldn't just see something, but I think I would correct them and say, hey, if we investigate and it is completely unexplainable, this person is doing these things with, for all intents and purposes, looks absolutely miraculous, then yeah, we would believe it. They miss the idea of investigation. First, you have to prove my cats didn't do it. Oh, look, I'm prepared to believe a cats would do anything, quite frankly.
It's true.
Yeah. The Egyptians knew what was up.
Sometimes. But yeah, like, for example, there you go. Look, we're getting subscribers on channels we're not even on right now. Amazing. Also, Tommy does a show with some Matt fellow who has hair or something. I don't know. It's not important. But they're live Wednesdays at usually 8 p.m. Eastern time. And sometimes interesting people drop by, like B.S. Lewis or Dr. Kip Davis.
Right.
And
Awesome.
me. So yeah.
Francis was talking about faith being a spectrum. I think also looking at this question and zooming out. And I do want to zoom out because if you subscribe to a particular belief system like Christianity, there are things from the Bible that we learn about God, right? But I think a lot of people are in this place of, like you're talking about, agnosticism, where, even if fine-tuning were true, like, does that necessarily indicate that that is the Christian version of the God? And so we have, atheism, agnosticism, then we have maybe deism or theism, which is like a more detached picture with deism of maybe a creator, but isn't necessarily this loving depiction of God seen through Jesus. And so I kind of want to work through each of those individual points. And so you both mentioned the fine-tuning of the universe. And so that discovery comes from science. And so in your last interview with Richard Dawkins, he said this was the nearest approach to a good argument. And so considering most people are listening to this are novices to science, can you unpack what fine-tuning is?
Sure.
Okay, just before we do that, yes. I feel like doing a video saying, atheists, look, we need better leaders. We really do. Like Richard Dawkins, Lawrence Krauss, like these people are absolutely disgusting.
Well, that's sort of the thing, though, is it's because like we told ourselves for decades, it's out of respect for science, because we've got the physicist guy, we've got the witty writer guy, we've got the evolutionary biology guy, and the guy who's actually a nice guy, but never mind that for now, morality guy. But whatever, like they're all really, really rich, very privileged white men, right?
Yes.
And we tell ourselves we follow them, we pay attention to what they're doing because they're so adroit, they're so eloquent, they're so precise with their language. But the real reason is they can afford the platforms. Like, what Lawrence Krauss is doing right now? He's on tour in Canada promoting his cancel culture book. Never mind. I'm not even going to get into that side tangent. For an organization that he created specifically to bring him in and go on tour. Like, that's ridiculous. He's not even top 1% level rich. And he's so rich, he can just create organizations to bring himself in as a guest to go on tour to make it look like he's still a respected person. Like, you reach a certain point where you just buy your own celebrity. And that's exactly what was happening. We found out from Rebecca Watson that the entire pseudo-feminist wing of the new atheist movement were all Richard Dawkins' ex-girlfriends. You know?
Yep.
Fuck.
Yeah.
We need leaders,
Was that
because they have good things to say, not just because they're fucking rich.
Was that Skeptic? Rebecca Watson? Yeah. I saw her video. Holy crap. Like, seriously, like, what the hell? And somebody made a comment that really resonated with me. And it's like, why is it that it's the transphobes are always the misogynists, right? Why is it that
Oh, well, I
the-
can answer
the-
that one. That's pretty easy because
okay, yeah,
transphobia
fair enough.
is misogyny with extra steps.
Well, that's true. That's true. That's a good answer. Yeah, I didn't think about that. But yeah, it's kind of when you find someone that's transphobic, they will almost certainly have a sort of a view of women that is, you know, women are just tools to be used kind of thing. It is wild how much it correlates. And you know, Christianity is no different.
Yeah.
The denominations that treat trans people well generally will treat women well, and you know the ones that don't generally don't treat women well.
That yes, that's true. I was just thinking about that pastor who made news recently by coming out to her congregation, like in church, in session
Hmm.
and whatnot. And whether that was wise or not, who's to say? There's pluses and minuses to be sure. You know, she's
That's brave
become the
though.
focus of the ire of the trolls of the internet, but
Yep.
also she's become something of a symbol that in this age of Trumpery and MAGA supremacy, there's still people willing to stand in front of their congregation, broadcast
Yep.
to the whole internet, and say, I am a trans person. And
That is so
that
brave.
takes guts.
That is incredible bravery. I mean, maybe she or he, I don't know, they, I'm not sure. What was it, a
She.
trans man or a trans woman? She, okay. Maybe she, you know, had confidence in her congregation that they wouldn't be mean to her. Did they accept her? I really hope so. Oh, I
As
don't
far as
want
I
to
know,
think.
yes.
Oh, that is lovely. And this is the thing. We've got to find Christians that are decent people, right? I see them online. I watch a guy who basically advocates for trans rights and he's Christian, and you know, I disagree with him on the existence of God. He can believe it. He is desperately trying to help people that I care about. You know, like I don't, you know, but we've got atheists as well who are violently anti-trans, and
Mm-hmm.
they are not on our side. They are not. If you aren't working for all humans, their well-being, then you are not on our side. You are not a secular humanist. You can't be a secular humanist and go, well, I'm going to work for all humans except trans people. Aren't they fucking humans? Doesn't the treatment that we give trans people in you know gender help for their gender, isn't that for their well-being? Like, what do you think we're doing out here?
That's a big part of why I mean, I am still an atheist in that I don't worship a god, but I've been moving much more strongly towards humanism because I'm at the point, especially with our society being what it is, where if you're on board with me that all humans deserve human rights, I don't really care what you worship. You have the right message. Let's work together, you know?
And it's a fairly recent realization, actually. You know, we do have this remarkable set of equations that govern the behavior of matter and energy. The gravity it follows an inverse square law, that the speed of light is fixed, that all of the properties of the atom follow certain abilities and rules about how they stick together or fly apart. Those laws, beautiful as they are, have constants in them that I don't know really anybody who will say we can derive the value of those constants from first principles. They're related to each other, so maybe there's some connection between them, but you can't figure out what they have to be on the basis of theory. You have to go and measure them. And so they have a...
We can't with just one universe. Like, if we could analyze other universes, then maybe we could figure out some kind of causal relationship between them. Like, if the strength of gravity is this, then the speed of light will always be this, whatever. But we need to, like, see other samples to determine what, if any, relationship there may be. We can only get so far with only one to look at, you know?
particular value. And maybe the easiest one to explain is gravity, because that's certainly familiar to us in everyday. So yeah, there's that inverse square law, and there's the gravitational constant. And that is, of course, important in the beginning of the universe for the way in which, after an inflationary period of everything flying apart, they began to actually coalesce. And that's how we got clouds of gas, which then became ultimately stars and planets and moons, and ultimately us here talking about it. So gravity is pretty important. But if you tweak the value of that gravitational constant just a little bit, depending on who you ask and whose calculation you did, I mean, a very little bit, maybe 1 part in a million.
What is the 1 part in a million?
One.
Like, how can you contextualize that?
Okay, if you imagine the gravitational constant out to 7 decimal places, and you change that last decimal place that was an 8 into a 7, and the rest is all the same. And then you go through the math about what would happen if it was just a little bit weaker. There isn't quite enough there to get the coalescence to happen. And so,
but we don't know that because we have no other universes to test. We don't know. It may be that things don't work the way they do here. They probably wouldn't. But if you move the gravitational constant, then perhaps the strong nuclear force moves to compensate. We don't know. We don't know if there's interrelationships. We don't know any of these things. And we also don't know if we'd end up with a different universe where maybe something else happens and we have better, more stable stars. We don't know because we can't check with only one universe to look at.
And it's even worse. The fine-tuning argument has an even worse problem. And that's sort of him saying, hey, if we change this constant, we don't know if that constant could be different in any other universe. Because what you're doing with this argument is saying, hey, it could have been any of these possibilities, right? It could have been, this number or this number or this number or this number, and assigning an equal chance to all of them. And we don't know that's the case. Like, for instance, zircon crystal, it only forms with no lead. So you can sort of point to it and say, hey, if there was a little bit of lead, that zircon crystal wouldn't form. Yeah, correct. But the fact that it formed meant there was no lead. So it's not like you can go and say, hey, if this was different, it would form. Because we don't know that the universe would have formed if those were different. There may be a 99.9% chance that the universe would only form under these constants. I don't know. I'm just saying we don't know the probability of any universe forming under different constants at all. It may be that the universe has formed and collapsed trillions of times, quadrillions of times, right? It's collapsed because it didn't have the right requirements. And then this one was stable. And now I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying we don't know. Like, we don't know. Like, it may be that a stable universe only forms when there are certain constants that come out at certain values. And it may be that, hey, this one has a 40% chance of occurring. And maybe 2 or 3 times it collapsed and maybe it came. We don't know. Like, or it may be that this is the only way a universe can form. The only set of constants that it can form under. So what's the chances of a universe forming with these constants? In that case, it's 100%, because that's when it forms. It has these constants. We don't know. And yeah.
As you started to touch on, all of this presupposes that the constants even can be different. We don't know that they can be at all. If there is only one universe, if there aren't gazillions of other universes, multiverses, or previous iterations of an attempt at universe that didn't have stable constants, if this is all there is, then they can't be different, because it's not a matter of making universes. There's that underlying, that hidden assumption underneath. It's a cart before the horse sort of thing. The universe is, the constants appear to be emergent properties of some underlying substrate. Like, for example, the gravitational constant seems to be tied to the speed of time, which seems to be tied to quantum interactions. We haven't quite nailed down how and why, but they all seem to be parts of the same thing.
Right.
Like, one thing, and it's not if you move this, then this, then this. It's they're all the same thing. With emergent
Right.
properties, we experience in different ways. Because remember, we're moving through the universe in a very unusual way. The vast majority of the universe is photons. Most of this universe does not experience time. It's moving through space at the speed of light. Space is effectively one-dimensional for it, and there is no time. We, as conscious matter, but even the unconscious matter, is an anomaly in this universe, in that we're moving through both space and time. We're moving through time very, very slowly. For some reason, we don't know why that is either. And why should it be this amount of the potentiality of the universe is in material form, and this much is in energy form? Perhaps there's a constant to that, or maybe it's just a random admixture. If you want to invoke genetics for some reason, it's very complicated and it's very weird, and we haven't got the fucking foggiest. And so to suppose that that all of this is on dials and was somehow dialed in, you have a lot of work to demonstrate that's definitely the case.
I will grant, though, it does have the appearance of fine-tuning, right? Like, it does look like it's fine-tuned. But we have the appearance of being fine-tuned to live on the Earth. And, you know, the reason isn't because we've been fine-tuned. The reason is because we have evolved to live on the Earth. If humanity originated on some other planet that was, you know, 0 degrees at average, we would definitely have evolved differently. We would have a lot more fur or whatever. So, you know, it's not the case that an appearance of something automatically means that's the case, right? Any more than, you know, a appearance of something blocking the river is evidence for a designer of a dam. It isn't. You know, like, that's just the appearance that you get. It may be a very, very natural blockage. There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. Physicists have sort of also said, hey, there are some ways we think that the universe could be more stable and sort of less entropy if we tweaked some of these constants. So there may be a better universe out there. And so why don't we live in that universe if that's the case? Why did the perfect creator make such a crappy universe is basically the argument. So there's the, you know, poor universe as well. And hey, from a naturalistic point of view, maybe universes don't form under those conditions, right? But it is surprising why a universe is produced that appears to mostly, almost exclusively, have nothing to do with us. Stephen Hawking said that if the universe is fine-tuned for anything, it's fine-tuned for making black holes, because it tends towards doing so because of gravity, and things attract one another and that creates black holes. So, you know, so yeah, it appears fine-tuned for us, or it has the appearance of fine-tuned for us, but it has a much greater appearance of fine-tuning for black holes. So, you know, if we're just taking it from what it looks like, then you've got to say, well, we're just a byproduct, and black holes are actually what God designed the universe for.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're certainly not designed, and that leads to another problem with the design argument is we see flaws in the design, like your river blockage thing. If you see the river's blocked, maybe it's a designer, but if it's a shitty blockage, it's only stopping half of the flow, you'd expect maybe a designer would have done a better job. You know, if you look at the humans, we clearly evolved to fit the conditions on the Earth. Not the Earth has the right conditions to bring about us, because, I mean, first of all, there's the other extinctions that came before us. We didn't appear until this time because there's nothing inevitable about us. It wasn't designed for us. But also, there's all the anomalies of human design, for lack of a better term. You know, there's a really long list, but a couple that we mention very often are the fact our retinas are on backwards, or the recurrent laryngeal nerve, or the fact that our breathing tube and our feeding tube are the same tube. There's a lot of problems, you know. Not a great design if it were designed. But Also, and this is why I still think the whole fine-tuning thing is a Mott and Bailey in the first place, is I understand why people want to push back on the design because it's such a shitty argument, but it is still just the Mott. The Bailey part of it is, even if it were, which God did it?
Right.
We don't know from that
Yeah.
fact. Like I said in the start of the show, I can just grant, sure, it looks designed. Now, who did it and why that one? How do you know?
So if you're unfamiliar with the Mott and Bailey, it's basically where you have two positions in a debate. You basically have the Mott, which is the outer wall, and it's a lot weaker, right? Like, so basically think of, you have a castle with the outer curtain, the outer wall of the castle, and then the keep in the middle, which is the really strong defense. And what Ember's referring to is when you can't support the outer position of Jesus did it, you sort of retreat to the, oh, well, it's some form of God that fine-tuned the universe. Like that's basically what Ember is referring to. So she's not wrong. It's sort of like well, it was fine-tuned by my God. We'll show it was your God. Well, then it must be some God. And just then you're sort of tacking on, well, let's just agree on that it was a God first. And I don't see any reason to do that.
Because, I mean, why Jesus? Why not Muhammad? Why not Vishnu? It's very silly. Like, just pull back the curtain and show me the damn God and stop playing word games.
You end up with things just flying apart in a pretty boring, sterile way. If you make it just a little stronger, then things come together a little sooner. But also, the expansion of the universe has a limit. And knowing that it takes billions of years before you get to the point where something like complexity of chemistry can happen because of all the things that have to happen in stars, you'd never get to that point. Everything would collapse back in a big crunch. So in order to have this possibility of something beautiful...
I don't think that's true.
Well, even if it is, I'm going to grant it, right? Just for the sake of argument, I'm going to grant it. If the conditions were right, it would collapse back into a crunch. Now, show that hasn't happened a trillion times before.
Yeah, if it's possible, why hasn't it happened? Because if you do get a crunch, then you're back to the initial condition of too much matter and energy crammed into a space that's way too small.
Correct. And then, so, it's fine to say that, but you're basically saying, hey, it couldn't have happened because these conditions aren't right. It's like, well, it could have happened before, crunched, inflated, crunched, inflated, crunched, until we reach this point where the conditions are sufficient to stabilize the universe. I don't know. I'm not saying that happened, right? I'm not making that claim. But you're claiming it's fine-tuned because it would crunch. And what I'm saying is that is a possibility, right? It's not logically impossible that there's been a quadrillion crunches before, and this is the one that turned out stable. It's not impossible.
The universe was doing a workout routine, lots of crunches, and then it stretched out.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. That had to have exactly that done. And the strong and the weak nuclear force and multiple other constants all have to have that same property.
So you're talking about like the conditions needed for life to exist on Earth.
Or for anything interesting. It's not just about this kind of life or this kind of Earth. It's just anything beyond some particles, which hard to imagine much intelligence coming out of particles flying apart by themselves. So anything that you would call thought seems to require these particular parameters to be set in a very precise way. And
we don't know that either. Something resembling thought could happen under very different circumstances. We don't know. But also, there's nothing inevitable about the ability to think. Like, it's this anthropo projection that we were talking about earlier. It's saying humans seem to be the most complicated things we can find, therefore God is just like us for some reason. There's no reason to say so, just that, it must be because we're made in God's image. The book said a thing. All that, it's fucking wild. Like, we very easily could have had an Earth where there's just trees and small mammals that dig in the dirt and keep the roots aerated or whatever. Or we could have had all sterile planets like the other 7 planets in our solar system. There's nothing inevitable about humans.
That seems to cry out for an explanation. And again, as somebody who also finds beauty in the equations, I find awe in the values of those constants, and they do call out to me for an intelligence that is far beyond anything I could possibly imagine.
I dislike this sort of form of thought. That it cries out for an explanation. Yeah, every bloody thing we don't understand cries out for an explanation because we want to find. We're curious. We want to find the explanation. But that doesn't mean you go, well, that's the best explanation I have. That is suitable. You know, like you're not actually explaining why you have given this explanation. You're just saying it cries out. Essentially, what I'm hearing from him, and I don't mean to be critical. I respect his work in genetics and the Human Genome Project. I really do. I really do. But sort of you saying it cries out for that particular explanation, you're essentially saying, well, I feel like that's the explanation. Right? Because if you had reasons, actual empirical or demonstrable reasons for making that conclusion, you wouldn't just say, well, it cries out for that explanation, right? You would say, hey, this is what points us to that conclusion. So I feel like he's just saying, hey, I feel like that's the explanation I want to give it.
Yeah, it's sort of another kind of projection. Like it comes across like an emotional reasoning. Since it's not reasoning, it's saying, to me, this needs an explanation, not that the situation itself is crying out for it, and therefore I want to give an answer even if I don't actually have the answer. So he's kind of telling on himself there, you know, like I want to fill in that gap even if I don't have the actual information that belongs there, and that's not great.
Who I don't think had to sit there and punch it, just knew and thought, and here it was. And I get it, that the alternative is that there are an infinite number of other parallel universes. And of course, we have to be in the one where something interesting could happen to have this conversation.
Well, they don't have to be parallel. They don't have to be parallel, right? So what you're talking about is multiverse kind of thing, parallel universes. They can be serial. That serial is fine, right? So difference between parallel and serial is parallel is side by side, existing in tandem with each other. They're just on different dimensions. Serial is the big crunch, the big bang, big crunch, big bang, big, like universes or child universes for ones that have existed in the past. Like, so it doesn't, like, it is a lack of, I don't know, imagination maybe, or possibly like, because the answer may be just a normal material answer that we just haven't found yet. That's the thing. Like, we may, like, you know, explanations, when you're doing a deductive argument, okay, that's deductive as opposed to inductive, right? Inductive is like saying, hey, I have this evidence that all points towards this person being the killer, for instance, right? Like, we found his fingerprints on the knife. We found, you know, him in this location at this time. That's inductive. It's basically saying, from what we know in the past, this points to you being the killer. Deductive is basically, well, let's clear every single other person, right? Every single other person of the murder, and you're the only one left that could have done it. It had to be you. That's deductive, right? You're eliminating possibilities till you're left with one and only one answer. And the problem with using a deductive argument like he's doing is that if we know nothing about it, right? Like, we know absolutely nothing about it. You have to take away literally every explanation, including the ones that we haven't even thought of yet, right? Like magic or something, or you know, it is a some kind of you know, a some kind of extra dimensional event occurred that caused the universe. You know, you're basically, even ones that we have no idea about. You have to be able to eliminate them as well, and that's impossible. So with so little information, I think that you cannot make a deductive argument. You have to make you have to say, hey, this is the evidence pointing us towards a fine-tuned universe. Because if you want to go for deduction, I don't know how you, when we know nothing about the circumstances, that you can get to deduction. I don't know how you do it.
Just kind of making it up.
I just think it's a lack of imagination. Like
Well,
nobody. Some of the
partly yes, but it's also partly bad philosophy. Like if you really start to,
yeah.
Francis may hand wave about it, but he'll turn around and start consulting the apologist crew about it because we know he reads their stuff. He's referenced lines from their books a couple of times now. And you'll inevitably run into somebody who will go, inference to the best explanation, which is to say, I take the explanation I prefer, and then I build up a case for it and call that a reasonable inference. Like, that's not how
Right.
inference to the best explanation works, but these guys aren't actually philosophers. They just like to talk about philosophy. But I digress.
To ever measure, except in the weirdest sort of way, the possibility that those really exist seems then to require a great leap of faith to believe in the multiverse. Maybe for me, greater than believing in a creator who made it this way for our universe. So yeah, I think it seems a little too easy to dismiss that and go, well, it's the multiverse. Think about that. The other thing is,
that's the thing is we're not saying there is a multiverse. We're saying we don't know. We're agnostic on that count too. You're willing to dismiss it without any evidence, just the same way you're willing to accept a specific God claim without any evidence. Let's talk about fucking evidence, shall we?
Yeah, I really think that you're sort of like, there's membrane theory as well, and the math works, but at the end of the day, we've got no idea whether it's true or not because we haven't found any of this stuff. Like, that's the thing. And to me, it feels like he's just uncomfortable with saying, well, I don't know what caused it. So I'm going to go for the one I have the most information about, which is the God.
I think that's another, that to what we were talking about earlier as to why people choose a specific religion. Part of it is in-group, out-group culture stuff, but another part of it is familiarity. Like, once a person has convinced themselves to believe in something supernatural, they go with, okay, which one shall I believe in? And that's where the genetic component drops in, and they tend to go with the thing they're broadly familiar with from the culture they're already in. They're like, oh, I know about this Jesus critter. I'll just believe that one. All the other ones are strange and unknown to me, and it'll take years to learn all the things. It's a very American way of thinking, but it's not only Americans who do that. C'est la vie. Also, I'm noticing a whole bunch of new people in the chat. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. Do take a minute to hit the subscribe button. We're trying really, really hard to get this channel to 10K this year, and I know that's a big goal, but there's a good reason for it. I want to be able to do proper fundraisers, and YouTube hides the button to do that behind the 10K subscriber limit.
Yeah.
So please do subscribe. Please do share. Mark and I do this every weekend. We take turns, 1 week on his channel, 1 week on this channel, but I do a bunch of other stuff here too. I do a morning show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern where we learn stuff, we delve into history. It's fantastic. I do bonus shows about trans rights and other things as time allows. I've got a member stream coming up on Monday. There's a bunch of stuff going on over here. So please, please do subscribe and join us for all our fun and shenanigans. And speaking of fun and shenanigans, Left-Handed Jedi just gifted 5 memberships. That's another thing you can do that's awfully fun because we have custom emojis and all kinds of other goodies. Those went to Mr. Peabody the Skeptic, Tawhid Islam, Jefferson Spatchcock, Chris Nuxel, and Joe Facetious. So congratulations, folks. Do enjoy all the fun custom emojis and all the other goodies, including the members exclusive content like the member live stream coming up on Monday. And I hope you decide to stick around and become permanent members because that helps a lot. I very much appreciate it. All right. Purple says 10K. Do you have any idea how long it will take to make that many sock accounts? You're going to need more email addresses, friend. All right, capitalism over.
that doesn't solve the question of why there's something instead of nothing.
Yeah.
Sort of the big ultimate question. And that also seems to require some kind of an uncaused cause to have there be some.
Yeah. So, I mean, in essence, with fine tuning, I think I saw this online somewhere, but someone was saying like if you took a pencil or something and you like threw it across the universe at a bullseye on like Pluto or something, that and hitting it would be like, that would be the chances that life would exist or something. And so the argument essentially is that with fine tuning, life is just so incredibly unlikely that like, what is the explanation for that? And I've heard you talk about.
I don't get that one either, because like life exists, therefore it's not unlikely. Like, behold, here it is. There's 100% chance because here it is, you know?
Yeah, and I dislike the way that they're using probabilities, right? Like I really, really do. We sort of see things as random, but really things are deterministic for the most part, right? Like whether you have free will or determined, I'm going to leave that alone. That's an entire other conversation. But you know, the whether or not you hit Pluto with that pencil is not completely random, right? Like it's not this random thing that happens. It seems random, but it all depends on the velocity that you throw it, the exact coordinates that you throw it to, down to really, really small amounts. So, I really, it's determined, right, by the physics underlying the throw. So it's not like it's just, well, it selects it randomly and whether it hits Pluto or not is random. We call it random, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts, it really is just a matter of physics. That's why we can do things that seem almost impossible, but if we know the physics, we can actually, like we landed a lander on a comet kind of thing, which still boggles my mind that they managed to do that. But, we did that because we understand the physics behind it. It wasn't just throwing it out there randomly and hoping that it lands on this thing. So usually the way that we implement statistics is in populations. It's in groups, right? Like this is how we implement statistics. So what we do is we say, okay, you flip a coin, and the more you do it, the more it goes towards the true probability of what happens, right? So if you're throwing lots of darts and one hits, that is a good use of probability, right? It will sort of tell you the true probability of somebody throwing darts at Pluto. What's the chances of them hitting it, basically? The true probability. And that is based upon a whole bunch of deterministic factors, how you see, all of this kind of stuff. But we don't apply it to just one throw, right? Because the probability of you like if you flip a coin once and you get heads, then if you just take that probability, then the probability of doing heads is 100%, which is not accurate, right?
Yeah,
like that is not. So the more you do it, you approach true probability. So you might do it 4 times and get 3 heads. It's like, well, that's 75% heads. But there was somebody who actually sat down and flipped a coin 1,000,000 times. I'm not even joking. They literally sat down and flipped a coin 1,000,000 times, and they must have had like bulging thumb muscles by the end of it, kind of thing. But it basically came out to the probability of, I think it was 50.000001 something tails, basically. Tiny bit higher for tails, probably because of the weight of the coin, kind of thing. But we cannot apply probabilities to a sample size of 1. We can't do it because it will be completely and utterly inaccurate. If you do statistics, thank you, Introduction to Statistical Data Analysis from university, the usual sample size for any kind of statistical significance is usually 300. When we've got 300 universes, we can start to make statistical analysis about it. But we don't. We have 1.
It's a start. But yeah, I'd also a couple of notes. The first is we do have an intelligent agent who threw a projectile at a planet and missed. So Elon shot a car at Mars. It's a planet and he missed. His level of intelligence may be questionable, but the fact of the matter is he is a known intelligent agent who had the ability to take the shot, and he still missed. So intelligence isn't a guarantor of success. success, therefore, is not a guarantor of intelligence. The other point is that it's such a weird juxtaposition. We're taking something that we know definitely happened, life exists, and saying it's vanishingly unlikely. There's this tiny, tiny probability. And then we're reversing that and saying, here's a thing that is an absolute certainty, but we can't demonstrate it. It's such a reversal. Like, we know there's life. We can demonstrate it. It's right here. We don't have to fuck around with probabilities. We can show it. But when it comes to a thing that theists claim is absolutely certain, we don't even have a dart sticking out of Pluto to show for it. There's nothing to demonstrate. What the fuck? Also, it's von Neumann probes. It's one of my favorite things.
This a little bit in your podcast and interviews, and I think you said that you find this can be compelling, but it doesn't really move you really. But so can you explain what your
I mean, of course, it's compelling. It's a great mystery, and it's an amazing finding, right? That if we were to adapt these values, then nothing could exist. There are so many questions that spring up in my mind. There are just so many. It's difficult to know where to begin. I mean, we said for a moment ago, God doesn't punch in those numbers. He just kind of knows that that's how it has to be.
He doesn't have to punch anything.
Is God constrained by these constants?
He chooses to be.
He chooses to be.
I don't know that in his
Chooses to be. How could you possibly know that? It's not in scripture.
And you would
Exists.
you'd expect that that a god, in order to do some sort of miracle, would have to violate some of those constants.
That's sort of the thing. Like, it's so frustrating. Like, what do you mean by God, Francis? Tell us what your God is, what it can do, and most importantly, why we should believe that it's out there and needs us to worship it for some reason.
Since those constants exist, he's not part. He created, but he is not himself part of the created universe.
So this is the thing that sort of confounds me, is that before the universe exists, and you just have sort of God up in the ether, and he's sort of thinking about creating this universe, to put it crudely, and for some reason, God is confined to these very narrow restraints, and in fact could not create a life-permitting universe, but within those constraints, and those and therefore.
Yes, that's one of my favorite counters to fine-tuning is, if there were a God, it wouldn't matter what the variables are. He could just make there be life.
Yeah.
Or
I
before
don't
this
know
universe
why
is
he'd
even
be
created.
constrained by any constants whatsoever, and I don't know why humankind would have followed a natural progression of sort of inventing fire and then being able to live in more cold climates, or do any of this stuff. Why can't we just live in northern Norway just straight off the bat without having any technology whatsoever?
Yeah. Why is so much of the earth uninhabitable if it was specially designed? But again, the miracles and things, it wouldn't matter what the constants are. And if God can't act within the universe, then what's the point? We're back to a deistic God. Maybe there was a creator, but if he fucked off, then it doesn't matter.
Right. And there's another problem with the deistic God that you're sort of describing, and that's you can't possibly have evidence for it. Because if the deistic God just set the universe running exactly as we see it and then went away, there would be no way to tell the difference between a naturally forming universe and a universe made by a deistic creator.
Yeah. So once again, like as I always say, we can play the word games, we can counter the word games. It's still word games. If your God exists, it should be the most obvious thing ever. Just pull back the curtain and show us.
Created. God is in some way constrained by the strong and weak nuclear
I
forces.
don't understand that at all. You're suggesting that God is part of the creation, that God put in place for the universe. God doesn't have to be constrained that way. God is outside of space, outside of time,
Yeah.
not basically having to adhere to any of such.
I don't mean that God is constrained by those forces, that they're like acting upon him. I mean that he's constrained in the sense that he can only create a material world that abides by those particular constraints.
Oh, I think you could create any material world. I think he wanted to create one that was interesting. And so he made the selection of those equations and those constants in order for it not to just be a big waste of time.
Would it have been impossible for him to create a universe that's life-emitting and just as interesting,
Not
in which gravity was stronger?
Well, I don't think it would have been as interesting.
But
God was interested in thought.
I mean a thought-permitting universe, right? So like a universe where basically everything is the same as it is now, let's say.
Like this is another one of those projections. I think he was interested in thought. Well, then why did he make a universe where every planet is full of thinking things? Everything on this planet isn't thinking. You know, there's animals that don't even have brains.
Yeah.
How? Other than saying humans are the best thing ever, and therefore God must be like humans, how do you get the idea? Like it's the reverse reasoning. It's saying this is the God I'm choosing to think of, and therefore you're drawing backwards from the conclusion to say there must be this God and he must value thought, but that's not borne out by the reality of the universe we see.
I get you. I just and then there's the case of, well, couldn't you have made a universe that also, like, for instance, you can't do anything immorally, universally immoral, right? Like, so if you have these rules of thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, and don't forget, he sort of said morality was one of his reasons. Couldn't you make a universe where you had free will, but you did not have the capability to, harm people, like you do not have the capability to fly? Wouldn't that be a better universe?
A reflex would suffice. Like you have the ability to touch a hot stove, but you have a self-preservation reflex that makes you pull your hand away unless you put a lot of willpower into overriding it. Like it would be trivially easy to make humans so that you could devote willpower in the same way to override your reflex and do harm, but you instinctively didn't, you know? We could do that. We could also send super chats like Left-Handed Jedi just did. Thank you, Jedi. Jedi says, if humans are the best thing ever, why are we the only animal that is destroying their own environment?
I don't think we're the only animal. I don't think that's true. I think that locusts do the same thing. I think they destroy their own environment. I think that there are animals that do so. I think viruses destroy their own environment, although that's not an animal, granted. But I think there are organisms which do this, and it's terrible for the longevity of the organisms. Don't get me wrong; it is absolutely awful. But I think there are other animals you could point to that do destroy their environment.
Sure, but I think that's the wrong. Well, yes, technically correct, which is the best kind of correct. But the whole destroying the environment thing, even if it's not only humans that do that, it's not a great design.
No.
Say that the gravity is stronger, but this dark energy that's causing the universe to expand is a bit stronger, or there's some other introduced force, or in other words, when God goes to create the universe, is he constrained in the sense that if he wants to create this thought-permitting universe, that everything has to be so finely balanced? In other words, I'm not sure why the meta conditions are set up so that everything is on such a knife edge. Maybe I can spell it out like this, right? So imagine, I have a friend who, Phil Halper, who made this documentary about the fine-tuning argument.
Skydive Phil! We love Phil. He's awesome. We also love Sapphire, because Sapphire used a member chat, which is another perk of membership, by the way. 5 months of membership. Thank you so much, Sapphire. And says, we're the best because... And that's one of the custom emojis, which, if you're seeing it in the live chat, will look like garlic bread. But it doesn't show the custom emojis through the software. But I can show you a bigger picture of it because it's on a shirt, which you can get on the website betterthanember.com, along with all the other assorted merch and whatnot. Because
yay,
it's amazing. Random capitalism.
There's a really interesting response that made reference to the Gnostic Christian tradition. The Christian Gnostics believed in the sort of the material world being the product of an evil demiurge. It's like this God of the Old Testament is the evil creator of the material world, and Jesus represents the true God, who is, you know, spiritually pure and above all. And he was like, well, doesn't the fine-tuning argument kind of fit in better with this kind of picture of the universe? Why? Because the spiritual creator who realizes that the material world is evil and terrible doesn't want the material world to come about. And so he makes it so that it is near on impossible for a material universe like this to exist. And yet the evil demiurge wants to create that universe. And so he comes in and he perfectly tunes everything. So although it's completely improbable, he just makes it right that the material world can be created. What I think that this kind of slightly contrived image can help to demonstrate is that the very fact that it is so difficult to bring about the material world, but by finely tuning these constraints, is itself a sort of a backfiring against the existence of a creator God who wants there to be a universe like this and has the...
Unless, to build on that demiurge idea, somebody once reversed the argument from suffering, or the problem of suffering, rather, into the argument from suffering, or the problem of good. Like, what if God is evil? Why does good exist in the universe unless he's not all powerful and whatnot? And one of the solutions happens to be exactly the way we see life on Earth, because you can create, you can push back on this destructive, oppressive force, but it always requires suffering. Whether you're talking about childbirth and literal pain and suffering and potential death, or you're talking about artistic expression, where you have to sacrifice some of your resources, be it money or whatever else you might trade to acquire the pieces you need, and the struggle and toil to project what you imagine onto the canvas. Any form of creation, it's possible, but only through suffering. And that is how we know God is evil. Wait.
I don't know. I think that both have their cases. Like the evil God concept kind of makes more sense to me, but not really, because, you know, the question is, you're right. It only works if there are two entities like with equal power pushing and pulling against one another, and it just happens to come out like this. But I think that a better explanation is there is no God and just stuff happens because the universe does not care. It is completely indifferent to any good things or suffering that is occurring within it.
So it appears.
Power to do it in any way which he pleases. For example, another analogy from the same documentary, if you were to have like a bag of balls, and you were pulling out a ball, and you were trying to figure out what the favorite color of the creator of the bag was, and you reach in and you pull out a purple ball, that might be confirming evidence that the creator of the game likes the color purple. But if you then tipped out every other ball and looked at every single other one except for the one that you picked was yellow, you might actually think to yourself, oh, okay, the creator of this game clearly prefers yellow, but I just happen to have picked the blue one. Now, obviously, that analogy doesn't work because that revolves around chance. But the point specifically being that if the conditions are set up so that there are an almost infinite number of ways things could have been when none of this could have happened, and only one very precise way that it could have happened, the person who sets up that meta condition, what are we to make of their view of the universe? You see what I'm saying?
I think I see where you're going. And I don't think there's just one way where...
It's an interesting analogy, not the least of which being that the ball changed from purple to blue midway through the example. I don't know, but I don't know. I find it compelling because there's a few different my mind is very strange, and I look at things from multiple dimensions all at the same time. And I'm like, did the creator set up that game with the purple ball in the most likely position to be pulled so that Alex would pull it first and get the wrong impression? Or was that just pure random chance? Or was it a total accident? There's even a purple ball in there in the first place. Like, maybe, to put it back into the example of the universe is supposed to be sterile. What if it was intentionally designed to be not life permitting? Like as a counterbalance to another universe running the other direction through time. this needs to be the sterile one, the dead world, like the moon is dead in order to enable life to exist here on Earth through tides and geological action and so forth. We need the dead world to make life possible on the live world. Maybe this universe is dead to make life possible in the other universe. And we're here by accident rather than intention. Sort of like the purple ball may have gotten into the bag of yellow balls by accident rather than intention. But we don't know. We're
don't know.
speculating at the motives of a creator we don't even know exists.
You could set the constants and the equations to end up with something interesting. This happens to be a really well-studied one that we happen to live in the middle of. Again, going back to Martin Rees' book, Just Six Constants, or whatever, it's close to that. He would argue that these constants are related to each other, so they don't have to have the precise values they do now, as long as their ratios are correct. So the six dimensionless constants that he outlines, including the cosmological constant. And if those are off by just a little bit, things don't work. But there's lots of solutions within that. So I think more of God is an artist. And of course, an artist can paint a lot of things that are really not very interesting, and then occasionally a masterpiece, but not usually just one masterpiece. So God has the opportunity.
Well, that's a matter that's subjective. And I realize he's doing an analogy thing again, but like you can't take something as subjective as art. Like Monet, for example, master, but he painted flowers and landscapes and shit. And so to some people,
Yes.
oh, that's not very interesting. Rembrandt painted a whole bunch of stuff. Some of his most famous works are portraits, but some people aren't interested in portraits. They want to see the melting clocks, you know? Like,
Yes, yeah.
It's very subjective. So what do you call a proper masterwork and what do you call not very interesting? What are your criteria?
Rembrandt didn't do the melting clocks. That was
No, that was Dali. I was saying maybe
Dali,
you don't want
yeah, Salvador
Rembrandt,
Dali.
you want to see Dali. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
I went
it's called.
I went to an exhibition of Dali's, and you could literally see sort of almost like how his life progressed. Like his earlier stuff was sort of more of those absurdist stuff and melting clocks and stuff, and it got really dark towards the end, you know, like it really was darkness and desolation, but you know, really fascinating insight into the progression of his life kind of thing, but really cool. Like there's always just, you know, incredibly moving pieces of art, no matter what the topic was, just incredible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another thing is like when we're looking at one specific piece as opposed to the entire body of work. Similar thing with Picasso. Like he's best known for his cubist weirdness because it was weirdness. That's one of the things that tripped off what we call the modern art movement, where people are doing things just because it's weird and no one's done it before and calling that art. And in some ways it is, but I digress. That was only one of three major life phases. Picasso like did normal artist shit, and then he did the cubist thing, and then he became like on par with the Dutch masters. He painted ridiculously good portraits, but you'd never know it if all you ever think of is the cubist stuff. Like it's unreal. Looking into the history of Picasso, maybe I'll do a show about it on the, you know, Learn Together Live, the weekday morning show at 11 a.m. every Monday through Friday Eastern time. Join us for that if you're into learning about things. I'm really trying to grow the channel this year, folks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
To decide which of the masterpieces are going to be considered worth doing because they're interesting, and you live in one of those. I'm not saying it's the only one that could have been. It's just the one that we have. And it fits the description of what would need to be a very precise thought process to end up with something that would be more than just sterile particles.
Well, you keep using the word interesting, and it really makes me think of, I mean, the thing that sticks out about this whole thing is how unlikely it is that life would exist. And so it almost makes me think of even, you know, in America, you know, if there's an underdog sports team that wins, that is so incredibly unlikely that they would win, it sticks out to humans like as something that's remarkable. And you keep talking about interesting and beautiful. Is that kind of really what you're getting at? Is that God made it interesting and that sticks out to us because of how unlikely it is?
Because it's unlikely and because it has complex.
It sticks out to us because we're here.
Yeah. It's the anthropic principle.
Yeah, it's literally the puddle. It's like, this puddle fits us awfully precise. For anybody who doesn't know, because every video is somebody's first video, I should explain. Douglas Adams, a satirist, humorist, insightful person generally, once posed that saying that the universe is designed, or that life was designed, or whatever you want to pose was designed, is very much like a puddle waking up one day and observing himself in his hole and going, this hole, why, it fits me rather perfectly. It must have been designed just for me. When, the obvious thing is that the puddle fits the hole. The hole isn't for the puddle.
Right.
It happens to be the shape it is because it's in the hole. Just like evolution, we are how we are because of our environment. The environment isn't because of how we are. And the puddle is so mystified. He's so certain because he's a sentient puddle. It's a fun story. Like I said, humorist. So he's so certain that this world was made just for him and his specialness, because look at how perfect the hole is just for him, that he's not paying any attention as the sun rises higher and higher and the temperature gets hotter and hotter, and then he starts to evaporate. And then he notices, and he's afraid. He's like, I'm shrinking. I no longer fill this hole. I'm becoming less. I'm disappearing. I must have faith, though, because clearly this hole was made for me. So things will get better. Things will be fine. And then he boils away and he's gone.
Yep.
Because it wasn't
Evaporated.
ever about him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lessons in that. If only Francis Collins was aware of Douglas Adams. He's read all these other books, but apparently never Douglas Adams.
I guess that's what I'm saying interesting. I don't think small particles flying apart forever is very interesting. I think something where you have a coalescence of stars and planets and chemistry that gives rise to amazing constructs, I think that's really interesting. And especially if it gives rise to...
You know what would be really interesting? Like an order of magnitude more interesting, given the way emergent properties interact and so forth. If we had a universe much like this one, because it's what's easiest for us to conceptualize, but all the material needs of every person were met, so that we didn't have to do the 9 to 5, the grind, you got to pay the bills, you got to cover this, you got to cover that. And we could unleash the entirety of our intellectual and artistic potential into creating whatever the fuck we think of and see what happens.
Yeah. That would be cool. That'd be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
To something that allows, through an evolutionary process, the development of creatures with big, complicated brains that can have a conversation like this and can even feel some draw upon them somehow to reach back out to God, who we're not sure is there, but certainly feels like we're called to. That's interesting.
Yeah. But to be clear,
I've never seen a scientist before reference their feelings in in something existing or not. I think that your feelings are a really bad way to determine whether something exists or not. Like, for instance, you might pass or you might be entering a darkened alley and you feel like someone might be in there waiting for you. That's a really bad way to judge whether somebody is in there or not. That's really bad. Like, if you take out a flashlight and get other evidence, then yeah, that's a really good way to determine it. But not just, well, what I feel is true. And it's a mistake that, people make all the time, especially in debate. They do sort of an argument from emotion, like, oh, but it'd feel really bad if this was the case. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you feel. Don't make me quote Shapiro. I hate quoting Shapiro.
So that makes me think of another analogy. I think, who the hell was it? I want to say it was Arthur C. Clarke, maybe. It's not important who said it, but it's called the black cat analogy. It's philosophy is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat. Metaphysics is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat that isn't there. And by metaphysics, we mean the woo-woo kind, not the philosophy kind.
Right. Yeah.
Theology is like being in a dark room and looking for a black cat that isn't there and shouting, I found it. Science is like being in a dark room looking for a black cat while using a fucking flashlight.
Yes.
It's yeah.
Possible for God to create that universe, that interesting universe in which atoms and nebulas and planets and humans ultimately form. It would have been impossible for him to do that with gravity being stronger.
I think it would not have been impossible. I don't think God chose to spend the energy of creation on something boring, at least just judging by what's around us.
So I mean to create the same universe. So not a boring universe. It's still an interesting universe. Everything is the same. We're still acting as we're acting now. It's just that gravity is stronger.
I think if that had happened, we would have had a big crunch before there was time for the complexity.
So what
form.
Alex is pointing to is an argument that you can use against fine tuning, and I pay it. I think it's a reasonable argument. It's like, why fine tune at all? And he really, I think that he really, to really solidify this argument, he has to lean into the omnipotence and omniscience and all of this stuff first, the God of classical theism, basically. Because if you have a God capable of anything, why does he have to fine tune anything? Can't he just make an interesting universe out of any variables whatsoever? You know, like, why does he need to change the physical constraints of the universe in order to come up with this one? Couldn't he just go, well, it can be whatever, and it's just going to come up with you know, human life? He's omnipotent. So I would have preferred him. Like, I understand what he's doing. I understand the case that he's making. I think it would have been more solid if he sort of said, well, is God omnipotent or at least maximally powerful first? You know, like, yeah. And I mean, he's not pointing to the boring things, you know, like, why is there so much empty space? That's probably the tack I would have gone down. Because there's stuff that's also very boring. There's no interaction whatsoever. There is not enough matter to have any interaction, meaningful interaction. And if you're pointing to the interesting stuff like humans, then why aren't we pointing to the boring stuff like so many desolate, uninhabited planets and asteroids and stuff?
And all the vast clouds of hydrogen that, if only the gravitational constant was slightly stronger, could have coalesced into a star, but nope.
Right.
In the heart of those stars, and it would have been not very.
So it would have been impossible for God to create that universe and there not be a big crunch.
I think if the only thing that was altered was gravity, everything else kept the same, the theoreticians would say, yeah, we had had a collapse of the universe before now. We would not have made it to 13.8 billion years.
So that means then that...
What does 13.8 billion years mean to a perspective outside the universe? Because time is only running in here.
Yes, it's local time. Yes, the local presentation of time in the local universe. Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's very peculiar. Very peculiar.
Provided God wants to create this interesting universe as it is today, God is constrained in doing so.
He chooses
by the conditions of gravity. Yeah, but so once he's made that choice that he wants this universe,
he wants an interesting.
He can't make that interesting universe, but by this very specific value of the constant of gravity. And so that acts as a constraint on God's creative power, because God wants to create this beautiful thing. It's kind of like saying, you know, if God wanted to create the Mona Lisa without using like a paintbrush, like traditionally, I think theists want to say, well, he could do that. He could just pop it into existence. There are ways of God to sort of get around the physical constraints. And if I said, well, no, I think that God chose to use a paintbrush because otherwise the Mona Lisa couldn't have been created and that would have been uninteresting. But the question I'm asking is, could he have made the Mona Lisa without the paintbrush? Could he have created the world as interesting as it is today with a stronger force of gravity? You know what I mean? Like, I understand what you're saying, that he wouldn't choose to have a gravity that has a universe that has a big crunch.
What if the point of the universe was to create the Mona Lisa, and so the initial conditions weren't just finely tuned for life to exist, but finely tuned for 4 billion years after the Earth formed and several mass extinctions? Eventually humans arose, and eventually Leonardo da Vinci arose, and eventually he painted the Mona Lisa, and behold, mission accomplished. And that's why we haven't seen God in hundreds of years. He got what he wanted, the fucker.
Well, it's odd, because if you're going to point to one event in the history of this universe, or the events of this universe, and say it was created for that, what separates that from any other event in the universe? Like, why why wasn't God's intention was the decline of the church and the all of these things falling down? I don't know. Like, why can't we just say, hey, the intention of the entire universe is for me to be drinking coffee right here. That's the intention. That's the outcome that we want. It's very strange. I don't see why we would take one over another.
Or why just one? And this goes to the limitations of human imagination being projected onto the idea of a God, like the whole concept of a God. There must be one God because I can only imagine there must be one single cause. Well, that's a limitation on you, bestie. That doesn't mean it's real. Similarly,
right.
why do we think an omnipotent everything God would want just one thing? Wouldn't it be more logical to suppose that he'd want all the things? In fact, that's part of the Christian theology, that everything that happens is in accord with God's plan. He doesn't just want one specific thing to happen. He wants all the things that do happen to happen. That's why they happen and not something else. And taking that and applying it retroactively, then why would there be one single God? Why would there be one single cause?
Right.
Because if all the ends are intended, then all the origins are entailed.
It sounds sort of like last Thursdayism to me, or last Tuesday. It's basically like, retroactively saying, hey, we could have just, been here for this event kind of thing because it happened. And to me, it's just a reverse engineering of what's happened to, give it some kind of explanation that it certainly does not justify it.
No, but I mean, if they're going to use sophistry, I can use better sophistry than they can.
Right.
Because it wouldn't lead to life. That would be so uninteresting. But what I'm saying is, why couldn't there be a stronger constant of gravity that in our current model would lead to a big crunch? But because God is God, he can create that universe nonetheless and avoid a big crunch somehow. Or is he constrained by the constant of gravity and what he can create?
I think I see where you're going. I think God is a God of order. And that meant that in any universe, God would choose to have matter and energy follow orderly laws.
Mm-hmm.
We happen to have a set of those. They might have been otherwise. We haven't talked about whether you could come up with a completely different universe where gravity was an inverse cube instead of an inverse square. Mm-hmm. That sort of makes my head hurt. But within the nature of the laws that seem in this universe to govern matter and energy.
Well, that's another one of those emergent property things, right? Like the reason the inverse square law works like it does is because attenuation along a 2D surface is a regular inverse relationship. In a 3D surface, you're adding another set of attenuation, and so you get inverse square. If you had a 4D spatial universe, then you'd get an inverse cube. Like this is what I mean about how the properties of the universe seem to be emergent from the universe.
Yeah.
Energy. If God is a God who's interested in something complex, and let's come back to my faith here, God is also a God of love. God wants to have creatures that God can have relationship with. And that is going to guide the decision-making then about what kind of universe will achieve that goal. I don't think it's constrained by the fact that God wants to love his creatures. That's who.
Obviously, I don't agree that any God described is a God of love. There's gods whose servants claim is made of love, but it hasn't been demonstrated by the actions of any particular God. But it does bring to mind the idea of what God wants. He wants a collection of creatures. He wants a garden, you might say. And if that were the case, if that were explicitly what we're going on, then we might expect a broadly uninhabitable universe full of wonderful resources we could exploit if only we could get out there and take advantage of them. But the only place we find actual life is here in the garden, walled off by steep slopes of gravity. It's very elegant. It's almost magical. And the Earth is kind of like a garden, except for, the hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes and so forth.
Yeah,
never
volcanoes, yeah. I don't remember having a volcano in my garden. I don't know. Maybe this is an American thing. I have no idea, but I do not. And sort of there's also the idea of God being perfect and also wanting something. like wanting worship from followers kind of thing, because the whole idea about perfection is there's nothing you could want because you're perfect already. So why would a perfect being want anything is a question. Now, I'm not saying that Francis Collins is saying that he's perfect. I don't think he's used those words, so it's certainly something that you would ask him. But, the people that do say, hey, God is perfect, like, why would he want anything then?
As I've often said, the concept of perfection seems to me to be incoherent, because if you're perfect, you can't grow, and that is a pretty big flaw. You can't change, you can't learn, you can't ever do it's a very limiting. Like, perfect is inherently imperfect, and so that's an issue. But I don't know. I think about a poem that I wrote way back in high school, where the prompt was, if everyone was on the road to hell and you could find the entrance to heaven, what would you do? And I won't bother you with the verses that I can only half remember, but the general gist of it was, I'd go back and tell everybody else to come over here instead.
Yeah.
And the teacher thought that was remarkable. She was like, well,
Why?
why wouldn't you go in? Like, why didn't we go up the stairway, or whatever the hell the case may be? And I'm like, because why wouldn't I go back and tell everybody else? Like,
That's weird. Because I have a sense of empathy. And and that's one of the things about the heaven distinction, that you would have to have people in it that are overwhelmingly joyous while people they love are being tortured relentlessly. And that's a problem, right? Because if I went to heaven and I was feeling joyful while people that I love are being tortured, that would not be me, right? That would be antithetical to who I am. So I don't know if I would even be me at that point. I would just be some guy that's, or like they fed me some kind of happy drug that it doesn't matter what's happening, I've forgotten about them or whatever. And how does that seem moral? Like, I completely understand. I think I would answer, I'd go back and grab everybody as well. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Do you
Like,
think a
do you
God is
get
gonna
denied
punish
entry for
you?
turning back or something? It's very strange.
Yeah, why would you, like, but why would a God punish you for trying to help other people?
It's not the kind of God I'd want to hang out with.
Right.
I don't know. I try to think sometimes to extrapolate based on that, something along the lines of, if I were a being of immense power, perhaps perfection, but I were all alone, well, that's not perfect. So what would I try to do except try to find a way to solve that problem? Not so much get worshipers, but try to find a way to create other things like me on my general level, so that I wouldn't be alone,
You know what? You're convincing me. I think that the Old Testament, if you told me it was just that God was a lonely guy with emotional problems, I think I would believe you after reading the Old Testament.
Definitely some rage issues from bottled up anger
Yeah,
and resentment, and
jealousy.
very, very jealousy.
Mm.
Yes.
Who he is. And if that's the case, I don't know that it's constraining him in terms of physics to choose the right parameters to make that happen. It's a means to the end. The end is what mattered.
But he couldn't have got that same outcome through different parameters. That's the constraint that I'm talking about.
Unless you change the laws also, and I don't know how you would do that.
Well, that's the point, Francis, is if he could get the end in multiple different ways, why this way? If he wasn't limited to doing it this way, then why things are the way they are? Like, either option voids the entire concept of fine-tuning.
Yeah. And you'd have to expect, I mean, I know that Francis Scollason's a Christian. If you are, and I know he's sort of doing the Mott and Bailey, and his Bailey is this, you know, nebulous version of God that doesn't interfere. But if you go to Christianity, God breaks the laws of nature all the time, like constantly throughout the Bible. You know, so it kind of sort of resting in this, well, you know, God creates order and these laws are ordered and he doesn't break them because that would be bad. Well, then you've got a problem there, because you know, the laws of the universe says that you can't live on after death, and you know, you can't resurrect someone from the dead, and that you can't convert energy from water to wine perfectly like you're talking about. Like it just is not feasible.
Now I'm curious. As many of you who watch my morning show know, I have a partnership with a brand called the Epic Water Filters. I won't run the whole ad because that's not what we do on this show, but I will put the thing up, epicwaterfilters.com, code EMBER15 for 15% off. I have a water filter in here. And now I'm wondering, if I put wine in here, would the filter convert it back into water when I try to drink? Like, just block all the wine particles that make it wine. I could pull a reverse Jesus, and that I find very funny. I mean, it'd be a waste of wine, but it would be very funny. Also, potentially a great ad. Maybe I'll actually try it.
Maybe. Do it. Why not?
Yeah. For science or something. Robin's like, what the fuck would you do that?
Yeah, I think Robin's objecting to you anti-whining stuff. I get you.
I mean,
for science.
I know. I mean, I do a lot of silly things for science, and
Yeah.
also photography. But Sapphire says proof Ember is the Antichrist.
Oh dear.
Mwah!
Oh,
Soon
look,
shall
I
nations.
mean, I just get jaded on that whole, like, to be honest with you, Red, if you watched all of the videos on the Antichrist by Christians on YouTube, like, everybody would be the Antichrist, you know, like it's like, seriously, Revelation, you can interpret those verses so loosely that, you know, everyone's the Antichrist, basically. It's freaking terrible.
I mean, we all outlived Jesus, so there's that.
Well, that's true. That's true.
We're going to stick with the laws we've got and just change one constant, gravity, and expect that to end up with complexity. It won't work.
Even for God. Even God couldn't make that happen.
You know, this sort of feels like, well, God could decide 2 + 2 can be 5. And
Right. So but that's what I'm asking is are these fundamental constants something like, you know, laws of logic, like 2 and 2 is 5, in which case, like, because if I ask a believer in God, do you think that God is constrained by the laws of logic? Oftentimes they say, in a sense, yes, but that's not really a problem because these are just the laws of logic. What I'm asking is, are things like the strong weak nuclear force and the strength of gravity like the laws of logic, and that they plausibly constrain God in the way that the laws of logic might? That seems to me a really unusual thing. Like when someone says God couldn't make 2 + 2 = 5, I don't see that as a challenge to his omnipotence, because it's logically impossible. That kind of thing, like a four-sided triangle, he can't create that because it literally has no referent. It's not a thing. God can do all things. Four-sided triangles just aren't things. And so I totally understand that. But if it's, well, God couldn't create a life-permitting universe in which everything was the same except for gravity being 2 times as strong, he couldn't have done that. Well, I do see that as a challenge to his omnipotence, because that doesn't seem like a logical contradiction in the same way. It seems like a physical contradiction, but not a logical one.
I guess the other factor here that
I understand,
you haven't said explicitly is that God apparently is interested in.
My brain is like, I'm pretty sure we could come up with a 4-sided triangle, because the rule of a triangle is that there's 3 angles. Typically, they have 3 sides, but I'm pretty sure there's a way you could do it. My brain is just contrary like that.
I don't think you can. I think that any like 4 sides would break the definition of a triangle. I really do believe that. You'll be breaking the law of identity. Yeah, a pyramid's different, left hand. That's not a triangle. That's made up of like what
Or
4 triangles
minimum
and a
of 4
square.
triangles, possibly more.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty fun though.
Yeah, no, I get you, but I guess another one's like a married bachelor kind of thing. Like paradoxes are just they
Exactly.
cannot
Like, I
exist
love
in
to
our
solve
world.
those things, like the square circle thing. You remember that time I made the square circle on video? It just
No.
it's fun to take these impossible things and then
Well,
just do them.
yeah, but you're
Sometimes
really
with incorrect
just
perspectives, but
breaking
still.
one of the laws of logic by doing it, like the law of identity or whatever. You have to use some sort of lateral thinking to do it, which breaks one of the laws of logic. You're ignoring one. So it's not really solved, it's just circumvented kind of thing by changing the law of
Yeah.
identity.
It's a workaround. It's rules lawyering, but it's really fun.
Oh, that's fine. You can find it fun. It's just his point is correct. There's nothing logically impossible about like so when we're talking physically impossible, like it's physically impossible for me to jump to the moon, right? Like that's physically impossible. But there's nothing logically impossible for it. Like the laws of logic are the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. They're kind of a model that we model everything around of what is possible and what is impossible kind of thing. So when we're talking, if something is logically possible, right? Like it's logically possible that I could be in the kitchen right now, right? Like there's nothing illogical. It doesn't mean it's the case. It just means there's nothing logical preventing that kind of thing. It's important to understand this because when he's saying, hey, if God can do everything that except for that which is illogical, like a paradox or a violation of the 3 laws of logic, then he should be able to make a universe with completely different constants, but still give rise to intelligence.
Mhm.
It should be trivial for a God to do that.
In fact, if it were the work of a god, and I'm not just talking because scripture says so, but if scripture were true, we would expect to see a flat earth like the book says the earth is. But like, why not make a universe with a infinite flat topographical plane? Because there'd be a whole lot more surface area for humans to inhabit and for life to flourish if the whole rest of the universe were just lights in the heavens. And the earth, where life is possible, was the majority of the universe. Why not do that?
Nature following order. And the fact that there are those equations governing matter and energy, they didn't have to be there. But if you'll take as a given that God is interested in order of nature, and also that God is interested in having relationship with complicated creatures like us, then I think the only means to that end is to have that gravity constant.
Well, what do you mean by complicated? Like we're biologically we're complicated, and I assume that's what he means because that's his field, but we're not especially more complicated than any other creatures. Right. Especially in our branch of the mammals and so forth. We have a lot of there's other creatures that are far more complicated from a biological perspective. So I have to assume he means we're emotionally complicated. And like, what does that have to do with the universe?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as far as cognition, we're definitely complicated. We have complex cognitive processes that are complicated, but why should that stand out as something incredibly special? For instance, chimpanzees, their short-term memory is way better than ours. So they do those, those puzzles where it shows you a sequence and you have to copy it. They're better than us at that. Like just across the board, chimpanzees are really good at those things because they have really good short-term memory. But it's kind of like we're pointing to something unique about humans and saying that's what makes us special. You might as well say, hey, humans are one of the only animals that sweat. That's what makes us special. You're really sort of reverse engineering what is special in the universe. Whereas really, I think it's like this subjective, well, we're really good at this one thing, So we consider ourselves really good by using it. And don't get me wrong, the cognition is incredible. It's been a really good survival trait. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, I don't think that's objective. I don't think there's like the universe goes, well, you're special because you can think about paradoxes or whatever. You know, I don't think that's a thing.
God wanted to create square circles in a universe where that's not possible. And so he created the circumstances for life to eventually arrive where some smart asses would figure out workarounds.
Yeah.
That was the purpose of creation. And also Mona Lisas. Did you know there's 2 Mona Lisas? We recently discovered that there was like a student in the studio. Well, probably there were many students, but like we found one of the students' works that apparently was painted at the same time or something like that. It's pretty interesting.
Wow, cool.
I digress. I must confess, I'm starting to get a bit tired. But
well, I mean, I'm happy to call it whenever you want. We're coming up on 3 hours. I don't know how far we're through. But I'm happy to, mostly because it is sweltering in this damn room. It is very hot.
Oh goodness, it
Yeah.
is very cold here. We hit well, for one thing, we're still on freedom units over here, so it's well below 0 Celsius, but it's 1 degree in freedom units, or at least it was for today's high. That was my high temperature today. It is very cold. Fortunately, I have a wonderfully powerful heater that I keep having to turn down. But yes, it's quite chilly outside. But
Yes,
yeah,
and
I
my
reckon that's probably, we don't want to boil our mark. And while Sleepy Ember can be fun, Ember, we're probably not going to be very productive much longer.
That's okay. That's all right. It happens. I'm cool with whatever. I'm happy with whatever. I think that we've made a substantial chunk through this. I mean, it's more like a conversation than a debate, but I'm definitely here for it. I'm definitely here for it.
Yeah.
I get where Alex is going. I think that, you know, he's definitely making like really good philosophical points. Don't get me wrong. I probably would have taken a different tact and really pushed on this idea that, you know, because there are constants when moved, those constants could be anything different, or there wasn't a high probability that they would come out to exactly what they are. But I understand, like, he's coming from a certain field of philosophy, so I totally get it. And it is a good argument, because a omnipotent God shouldn't have any constraints on what he does. It could be, you know, gravity is half as much and people can fly through the air, and that's even more conducive to us succeeding or whatever. So, you know, I don't see, and I think a better argument is sort of, well, if a God could constrain this universe in any way he chooses, and that's not logically impossible, so we can do it, then why have so much empty space and supernovas colliding with one another? Why do it in this natural process at all? Like, what's the point? Why leave it? And I think they brought it up. Why let it run for 13.8 billion years until we got here, kind of thing, you know, until life arose? What's the point of that? Is there life somewhere else that was developing? And what was the point of that? Like, it's just so many questions. It raises so many more questions than it solves. Fine tuning does that. It raises a whole bunch of questions, as in, well, if it's fine tuned, why is it like this? Why is there so much empty space? Why is it that black holes seem to be the end result of everything? Why? So and you know, fine tuning doesn't answer those questions.
It's especially with an omnipotent creator. Like, if you wanted to suppose a different kind of creator who isn't, I mean, first of all, I don't like the conception of a creator in the first place, because that's, you know, putting the cart before the horse. You haven't shown there's a creation that requires a creator. But
yes,
it just doesn't jive. Like, I might get, like, with when the holographic universe thing was a possibility, or simulation universe, or the Matrix, or whatever you want to call it, then it'd be relatively easy to say that the universe is the way it is because that's how it was programmed, possibly due to memory limits or other system limitations. We don't know, but we've pretty much debunked that, at least to the limit of our ability to understand the concept of simulation at this point. But
Well, I think that was popular because people pointed to the expanding universe and comparing it to Minecraft of all things that procedurally generates, world as you go outer and outer.
Procedurally
But
generated galaxies. I love it.
sure, why not? Why not?
That would be pretty cool, though. Like, if you went far enough, because if the universe are infinite, technically, if you go far enough, you start seeing things repeating. Tree, bush, clock tower, tree, bush, clock tower. Oh, goodness. As I said, I am easily amused. All right, we will resume this next week over at Mark's channel. Make sure you are subscribed to Mark Read Atheism, especially if you want to see part 2, but also because Mark does a bunch of other cool stuff, like
I do.
and is God the Asshole, I believe, is the current one.
Is God the asshole? Yeah, that's currently what I'm doing. It seems to be making some people very, very mad. I've had a couple of comments that just say you're stupid and stuff, and it's like, okay,
Oh, good. Thoughtful
yeah,
debate.
no, I think that, yeah, I really, it's just we're doing presentism on God, basically. If God did the things that he did in the Bible today, would they be moral or immoral is the question. So yeah.
That actually is a really, really fun concept, because so much of the atheist complaints against, or the agnostic complaints, I suppose, against the Christian God specifically, is all the moral evils in the Bible. The Christians are like, oh, moral objectiveness and yada yada, but like every single moral horror you can name, God does at some point. So like, what morals are you talking about? So
yeah, and if you want to appeal to the nature of God, that's fine as the moral substrate, that's fine. But unless you are acting like the God of the Bible, then you're not getting your morality from the nature of God, because things act in their nature. So, there's a problem there.
Yar. 'Tis true, 'tis true. So make sure you're subscribed over at Mark's. Bunch of good stuff there.
Oh, thank you.
Make sure you're subscribed over here, because whatever we do the following week, whether there ends up being another part to this or a different debate or whatever, we'll be back over here in 2 weeks. Plus, I do a bunch of other sorted stuff, like the bonus shows I mentioned, weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern every weekday.
Live learning together. Yeah.
Hell yeah. It's good stuff.
Well,
we have
Ember
interesting
takes
stuff.
some topics, and we learn about them as it goes along. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. So thank you all so much for joining. It's lovely to see everybody, and the live chat has been lively today. I appreciate that as well.
Yeah. Oh, look, I like theists in the chat. I find conversations interesting. I think that we sort of have a no preaching rule, because not these guys. They've been fine. They've had conversations, disagreements. Had differences that provided sort of arguments for stuff. Totally understandable. We just have problems with theists coming in and they just want to preach. They just want to say, hey, this is the case. Provide verses. They don't interact with us. They don't talk to us. They just post stuff, basically, and that isn't the forum for this. But I love these guys. These guys have been great. I really think they've been fantastic.
Hell yeah. I mean, for the most part, a couple of people have been,
for the most part. Oh, I think we had to time out someone whose caps lock was broken again, but that's okay.
No.
Yeah. The broken caps lock syndrome is terrible. Yeah.
Oh goodness.
The old BCS.
For realsies. Alrighty, folks. I've one of my favorite tools here on YouTube is the stream redirect, and I just real quick check to see who is on. I'm going to be sending you all, if you choose to stick around and go with the forward, to our friend DJ Ozzy Oz, who is in the middle of doing illegal heists or something. Slight change of pace. I hope you enjoy. And as always, oh, thank you. This is my favorite hat. I have a bunch of hats, but this one's my favorite. I appreciate
that. One's awesome. Yeah.
But as always, remember, you don't have to presuppose that the universe is fine-tuned and therefore whatever the fuck you believe in must be the truth, because you are better than religion. Good night. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for January. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkisson, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Secular Feelinist, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, Geo Sam, Thriver Scapegoat, The Godless Engineer, Why Because Weed Bro, and Katie Bluebird. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
Just like a spark that's breaking out, can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for